Can you unmute me for the virtual folks?
You're breaking. You don't need to unmute.
I don't use this, use your other.
Yeah. Okay, well, good evening. We'll call the order the HARC regular meeting on Wednesday, September 21st at 5:30 at Rebecca Hall. And in case you're listening virtually, go ahead and sign in electronically, virtually, or if you're on the phone, the number is 301-715-8592. Our meeting ID is 825-0204-389. Passcode this evening is 568340. Before we start, I want to acknowledge the two site walks this evening. This afternoon, first one was at 4:00 at 133 East Colorado, during which that sidewalk we had discussions that only related to the orientation of the site, the physical characteristics of the site, and the layout of the site. Attendants were Mark Schambach and Lennon, Stacy Lake, Bob Mather, Andrew Williamson, John Wenzel, and Erica Jensen. And that was followed by a second site walk at 4:20 p.m. at 214 South First Street. Same rules, only had discussions related to the orientation, site, physical characteristics, and the layout. Present were Mark Schambach, Karen Lannon, Matt Lee, Bob Mather, Andrew Williamson, John Wenzel, and Erica Jensen. So present tonight from Town Council. At the moment, we don't have anybody joining us. From staff, we have Piper, Alex, Erica, and Jana. And we'll take our roll call, starting with Kieran Lennon,
Stacy Lake,
Matt Lee,
Mark Schambach.
Bob Mather.
Andrew Williamson.
Welcome all. And the first item of business is election of officers, discussions or nominations.
I'd like to make a motion that Mark Schambach continue as our chair.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Discussion? You don't know me very well yet. Kieran,
Kieran, yes.
Stacy, yes.
Matt, yes.
Bob, yes.
Andrew, yes.
thank you.
I'd also like to make a motion that Stacy Lake continue as our vice chair.
I'll second that. Any discussion? Okay. Kieran, yes.
Matt, yes.
Mark, yes.
Bob, yes.
Andrew, yes.
Thank you all, and we look forward to, with the new members of the board, accomplishing some great things. I'm excited, and I think I've shared that already. Unless there's any other discussion, we're going to have approval of the minutes
We
motion.
have vice chair as well.
Oh, the new second vice chair,
Sorry, second chair.
new position.
Meaning, the board decided to appoint a second
Thank you.
vice chair. Because we have a fair number of recusals. It would just be in that instance if both the chair and the vice chair were unavailable or recused from. Which happens.
I'd like to make a motion that Kieran continue as our second vice chair.
Second that. Stacy, yes.
Matt, yes.
Mark, yes.
Bob, yes.
Andrew, yes.
Okay, well, now I can speak for the never before three officers, hopefully, and say how excited we all are. And especially to have some great new members, of which one couldn't be here tonight, but staff announcements, Jana.
The only thing I'd like to say is just welcome to our new HARC members. Andrew, Bob, Chris, thank you for stepping up. Thank you for volunteering. It means a lot to the board, I know, and especially to staff to have a full board again. And I am very optimistic about our future together.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's
Thank
it.
you.
But I do have the HARC review process slide mark up if you would like to.
Yeah, well, I'll start with that. I just want to make one follow-up comment, since it's the only time in the next year that I have a chance to say this, and I have a reason to say it because we have new members. Very briefly, I just say, please always remember our 4 values, starting with preservation, efficiency. You got your pens, respect and consistency, but be blind to the applicant, the usage, know I like, I feel. John has already drilled that in. And the last thing is on efficiency, which we've made some strides and there's more to make. When we talk about the work session tonight, that's a huge one to debottleneck the 9-month waiting time. But I just also like to urge the new members in particular, because I already see it on some of I actually on both of their drawings tonight. Come prepared with your notes, any ideas of any other conditions if needed, and have those notes ready so that we can then be really ready to discuss and more efficiently. So, but at the same time, as John has always schooled us, come with an open mind. It could be other members' comments that change, the look of it, or the public comments, and I'll speak for myself. Those things influence me time and time again, but be prepared, as the Boy Scouts say. With that, we'll go through the rules of the meeting.
While I'm pulling this up, I see that Councilmember Arguelles is joining us.
Okay, belatedly. Yeah, we have Jesse Ray belatedly. Welcome. And anybody else yet? Thanks for joining us. So with respect to the hearing process, you see that? Can you blow that up? Can you blow that up a little? Oh, thank you. For those of us in the 4th quarter, the HARC chair will introduce the project, and then the staff gives the presentation and answers HARC's questions. The applicant will then give a presentation, which we encourage to be less than 30 minutes. The public will be invited to make comments, which we ask for 3 minutes or less, so everybody has a chance. And there is no dialogue allowed between the public, the applicants, and the HARC members. The applicant may address any comments made by the public in a rebuttal, and then the public comment will end. The applicant makes any final rebuttal, and then the HARC members deliberate and then take vote. So those are the rules for those of you listening that may not have attended previous HARC meetings. Would remind everybody that to please follow those rules and the timeframes. Public can comment on non-agenda items.
Hey, Mark, before we do that.
Oh,
I
yes.
don't know that we approved the minutes yet, did we? I could have
Oh,
blacked out there.
Thank you very much. Second Vice Chair. Everybody's watching. Do we have a motion?
Yeah, I can, I'll move to approve the minutes dated August 17th, 2022 as presented.
Matt will second.
Okay, let's vote.
Kieran, yes.
Stacy, yes.
Matt, yes.
Bob, yes.
Mark, yes. Sorry. And then I will move to approve the HARC chair meeting of August 19th, 2022 as the sole attending HARC member as written.
Actually,
Oh,
think
I was
Stacy
there
or
for one item,
Oh, that's right.
so I haven't, how do we do one of these?
Mark can approve them.
I can still approve them if you think there's a change to the minutes that need to be made.
I don't.
You need, okay, good. All right, and thanks, Kieran. So excited about this agenda. I can't wait to get to it. Any public comment on 9 non-agenda items this evening? And seeing none and hearing none, we'll move on to the work session. Jonna, lead us to the water.
Thank you. Okay, so this is a work session to discuss amendments to the HARC classification of applications and HARC review and recommendations. I will also be present at the P and Z meeting tomorrow night to discuss this very same thing, similar presentation. We've already held 2 work sessions with town council on this topic. The first was August 23rd and the second was September 13th. And at that time, they directed staff to proceed with the changes in principle and have asked HARC and P and Z to weigh in as well. And I'll there are specific things especially that they would like your feedback on. So the intent of these changes is to better streamline the HARC review process. After several years of working with these land use code sections and HARC review, it seems that we can make it better for applicants, for the board, and for staff. So I'm going to start with the easiest bits first. And I think we'll just take them one at a time. The first item is the HARC reviews and recommendations. I've brought this up to you a couple of times recently. So currently HARC is required to make review and recommendations, or what we call R&Rs, on zoning amendments, land use code text amendments pertaining to areas within the historic district, preliminary large-scale and small-scale subdivisions, preliminary large-scale and small-scale PDs, and minor scale subdivisions, which is a chair level review. So those of you who have reviewed these items, you know that it can be difficult for HARC members because there are no specific criteria for HARC to review when you're looking at a subdivision or a PUD. Often there are not even plans to review at the earliest stages of a PUD. So there's nothing to apply the design guidelines to. And you're also often asked to review items that are not normally within your purview. So it causes some confusion. We have proposed to remove most of the review and recommendations from HARC's purview, except for zoning amendments and land use code text amendments. We discussed with town council, and Mark was part of the conversation, to keep some kind of review for large scale PUDs. As a preemptive way to set expectations for a large development before it gets to HARC, which I think everyone is supportive of. Council suggested that HARC be consulted before the preliminary stage, such as at a conceptual stage or even a work session. Staff have discussed this amongst ourselves and are recommending that we would encourage applicants coming with HARC and P&Z. And at that time, you can provide feedback, give guidance before we get a formal application for PD, and certainly before they come to HARC with a development application. So that's why that specifically is still highlighted yellow, because I'd like to hear your feedback on that specific item.
So we'll stop and just do one at a time, just like this.
Okay, I can keep going. or we
No,
can
no,
go
this would be
back to-
good. Do one at a time and then we're all ready at the end.
Okay,
I
great.
think, right, guys?
Yep.
Okay. So the only comment I have about a new work session jointly is that it will take more time than just an R&R where we sit there, because we're going to be listening to all the P and Z issues also,
It
right?
doesn't have to be a joint work session. We can
Oh,
bring
I
it
thought I
to
heard
a
the word joint. Oh,
No, it could be, but it doesn't have to be, and we can
Okay.
bring it to a regular meeting.
well, let's hear what other people think. I mean, either way we can weigh in, I guess.
Squash it like a bug. That's what I said last time, I'm sticking to it. Yeah, we don't need to be doing these R&Rs. Squash it like a bug.
Yeah, in the ones I've been involved with, the difficulty is that in a work session like that, a lot of stuff is put out on the table, and it's been hard for me to even keep track of what is within, what isn't within purview, and which things we're focused on. And clearly it's mass and scale, but I think a lot of times what happens is by the time that comes back around, the project looks so much different than it did at a work session level. It's hard to keep those things straight. And additionally, at a PUD, there's a lot of trading. In other words, you're trading a public benefit for increased height or whatever the trade may be. And there's no guidance given on which things are more important than other things, and how to equate those trades. And so that's been the other difficulty. And I don't, I know we're not trying to address that here, but by taking some of the smaller considerations out from under our, off of our agenda, I think it'll focus us more on those larger ones. That makes sense.
John, is your recommendation that the applicant have a work session with HARC or a joint work session with HARC and P and Z before they start the P and Z process?
Yes.
Okay. And this wouldn't be a requirement, it's just going to be staff's recommendation. You would be saying to the applicant, hey applicant, if you if you want to hear what HARC has to say about the mass and scale, you should do a work session.
I think we would encourage those applicants with projects that we think that HARC would like to weigh in on to have a work session.
Is it a rule or encouragement? I think he's asking.
It would be a rule.
Rule.
I mean, I'm sorry, it would be an encouragement. It would be staff encouraging that. And it may not be, it may not be necessary for some, you know, if it's in the historic district, I would say yes, for sure. If it's outside the historic district, if it's a large scale PUD request for variance to the parking or something that doesn't affect the dimensional requirements, and I would say, no, that's not, you know, I don't know that it would benefit a park or the applicant.
That being said, I would think that would be a good path, which you've outlined. It's a recommendation.
Recommending work session.
I agree. I don't have anything. else.
Likewise, I agree too.
And the only twist to that, I'd say if it's within the district, and again, we're throwing away all the zoning subdivisions, it's just large scale PD, which will save us a lot of agenda items. Could we get any consensus that within the district, that it would be a shall meet? And then it's an encouragement, if she feels it's relevant outside the district? My mind is always within the district, but I don't know, start at the end and say yes or no. I don't care, straw poll.
I think Shauna's more than capable of, you know, working through these, and if she feels like a work session with us is necessary, the applicant wants a work session with us, and I'm fine not mandating anything.
I'll agree with what Kieran said. I think where I'm mildly concerned, you know, with this going is that we're going to essentially split. I mean, it's already split, but we're going to not codify, that's the wrong word. We're going to further clarify within the HPOD and without. But in terms of community members, you know, at large community members, the town of Telluride is the town of Telluride. I think a large scale PUD, one block outside of the historic district hypothetically could have just as much of an impact on the concerns that community members would have. I'm leery a little bit of, I mean, I know we're going to talk about this a little later in this process, but separating within and without, I'm not fully seeing that as such a black and white line or black line or a line like. Sorry, you know, here we go with my rambling train of thought stuff again.
Matt,
I would think if there was language that would allow you discretion, say it would be required unless you think staff doesn't think it needs to be required. I would agree with
that's good.
Mark. I mean, I think this effort's taking theoretically a lot of us things off of the full commission's plate. It's putting more on the vice chairs and the chairs. But I think it would benefit projects and the public if we could comment on PUDs. And there might be times where we don't have any great input and sometimes where it's valuable input.
so you're suggesting that it would happen unless unless staff decided not.
But yes,
So we leave it. It's the normal operating procedure, but then Jonna can, like she said, a parking garage or something, she's not trapped. I like that language.
Yeah, I think that makes sense to me that it's kind of there unless Jonna decides that we don't need to do it.
however you want to word it, whether you wanted to make it a requirement that staff can waive, or if you want to say it's not a requirement unless you feel like you need to elevate it to one.
Okay. I'm following you, and I guess I'd like to just maybe clarify a little bit. I think less important is where in town it is, but what the ask is. Okay.
Yeah. Like what Stacy was trying.
Yeah.
I didn't want to blur the lines.
So I think I'm clear on that.
Well, we all like Matt's suggestion, if you're good.
Okay, so staff's discretion.
Well, I think he
But
said
it-
standard operating procedure unless you veto it, is I think what he was saying.
I think whatever way you want to word it, that makes the most sense administratively.
We'll figure that out. I'll figure that out with the planners as well, because it's gonna be a mutual decision.
Yeah, I think that covers it. I was gonna say.
Okay.
Okay, moving on. This item you don't have to agree on. It is going to happen. It's been proposed for next year's budget. This is an increase of the stipend for HARC and P&Z members. It's not a change to the code. It's just that council actually wants to give everyone a raise. Currently, the stipend, as you know, is $150 per month for all members. Staff and council has agreed that doubling that for board members to $300 per month for members and $450 per month for the chairs and vice chairs of HARC and P&Z, because as you said, and as you've noticed, I think there will be an additional responsibility on the chairs going forward. We know that you spend a lot of time preparing for the meetings and at the meetings. And it's really just a way to acknowledge your commitment to the boards and show you some appreciation. It also may encourage some people in the future, people in the community who may not otherwise be interested or able or willing to serve on this board. So there was a great consensus to go forward with this, so. Okay,
About the
so
second chair.
That's it. Cheers.
Chairs,
chairs.
vice chairs.
So,
I need friends, not money.
By that, Karen, sorry. Okay, so moving on to the meat of this, the HARC application classifications. Currently, there are 4 classifications or categories for HARC applications: large scale, which requires a 2-step HARC board review process, preliminary and final; small scale, which requires only a final review by the HARC board; minor scale, which requires a review only by the HARC chairperson; and it's insubstantial scale, which requires review only by staff. A few years ago, we also implemented, but did not codify, a policy called determination of no effect, which requires review by staff, but doesn't require a HARC fee or a certificate of appropriateness. And this is very minor alterations to non-historic buildings outside the historic district. This is like vents or replacing windows or things like this that don't actually change the appearance of buildings. So right now, these classifications are kind of in 4 big buckets that aren't further broken down. There are only 2 categories that refer or make a distinction between inside and outside the historic district. That's new construction and residential zone districts for small scale and minor scale applications. So the first goal is to distinguish the historic district from outside the historic district. You're all familiar with the boundaries of the historic district. So we would actually start with 2 big buckets, inside and outside the historic district, and then break it down by zone districts, residential zone districts and commercial zone districts. And then beyond that, into large scale, small scale, and minor scale. There is a 3rd category that will be necessary, which will apply everywhere. It's a kind of a catch-all, and it would be for things that apply everywhere, like landscaping, signs, fences, CA amendments, things that just happen kind of regardless of where it would be in town. So the second goal of the revision is to change some of the current classifications and the threshold for the application scale. And these recommendations are based on a pretty thorough review of HARC applications from the past 3 years. We looked at the scale, whether it was in or outside the historic district, which zone district it was in, and the amount of new floor area that was proposed with each project. So here's a chart. It may not be, it's not legible at all. Let me see if I can increase it a little bit. And I'm showing you this with some trepidation, actually, because it will make your eyes cross. It's a way that I have put together that helps me kind of keep track of where things are moving to. And it helps kind of provide a glance at the changes to the floor area thresholds. So the table above are the existing land use code requirements. And below are the proposed changes. And first of all, it distinguishes between inside and outside the historic district under new construction and additions. And most of the changes which I've circled and that are in bold are increasing the lower thresholds from 750 square feet to 950 square feet. 950 square feet was proposed because that's the size of the largest accessory structure that could be built on the largest lot in town. And so that seemed to be a logical breaking point. It doesn't seem there's any reason why 750 was ever chosen. But that is in mostly the residential zone districts. And then we would bump up those applications in the commercial zone districts, the lower threshold from 1,500 square feet to 2,000 square feet. The upper thresholds generally stay the same. So the upper breaking point is pretty much the same as it is now. And most of the changes that are proposed are in the small and minor scale categories. And from minor scale to insubstantial, as you see, these changes would also allow staff to review small scale new construction outside of the historic district and small, very small additions in the historic district, which would be less than 10%, under 1,000 square feet in the district, and outside the district under 1,000 square feet and less than 10%. That's a pretty small addition. So, and I would just remind everybody that the director and the chair can always elevate an application. So if we get something that looks a bit complicated or outside of our comfort level, we can elevate it to the next review. So next slide. So here is a chart that just shows an example of what some of our current applications would look like with the changes. And I want to say this is just an example. This could and may change. I don't want applicants who are watching to hold me to this. Nothing is final, but in this list, which I made a few weeks ago, there are more applications we've gotten since I made this list, but of the 26 large and small scale applications on this list that are under or awaiting review, there are 12 that could potentially move to minor scale or chair level review. They're all outside of the historic district. By way of example, the projects that I've bolded are projects that we'll be reviewing tonight. We aren't going to discuss them right now specifically, but since you've read the packets and you've studied the plans, you have an idea of the complexity of each of these projects. So these 3 large-scale projects that we're reviewing tonight would not change. They would remain large-scale under the new proposed code. The one small-scale project would move from small scale to minor scale. That would be from board level review to chair level review. And because it is outside of the historic district and it's less than 2,000 square feet, it's about 1,800 square feet. So that's a good example of one that would change. Mark, is this what you were hoping to?
Yeah, it answered. It just gave us a snapshot view.
It's a snapshot.
I was trying to figure out the chair position, how many we would get rid of, because it's insubstantial. I mean, I don't know how many cell towers.
I didn't
But-
analyze the number that would go from minor scale to insubstantial. But you're right, it would be telecommunications, application. It's
Yeah.
things that you take about 30 seconds to review during the chair meeting
Yeah,
and typically don't affect historic structure.
and just to catch everybody up, because I know we have to give a recommendation on how we split this, but we hear 2 or 3 a month. It takes me 20 minutes usually, because I rarely vary. If I do vary, it's more stringent than maybe what staff offered, if you look at the record. But I think there's some insubstantial that the chair position is going to lose. And I don't know that it's all of those 2 or 3 a month. And then it sounds like this one snapshot, 12 would move in, which is
Well, this wouldn't be in 1 month.
right. No, I know.
You would still have maybe three or 4 a month at
And
the chair level.
That's where I was going. The bottom line is, I think there'd be 3 or 4 rather than 2 or 3 a month. And there have been months where we had 3 or 4 when we were even busier for the pandemic. And so I don't think that's intimidating at all. And I think those going to staff, it's long overdue anyway, and debottlenecking the board. And there have been a few cases, just as a matter of trust, that I have very few, but about 3 in 8 years that I have elevated back to, or maybe 2, I can think of, back to the board. If I think it's iffy, I'm not going to hesitate. So just statement of opinion. So
I have a question. On your chart, there are several that are small and still small, and then
Yeah.
the 12 that are changed to minor. What would be the criteria for determining when it would be moved to a minor scale
So these are all still in the historic district.
in the historic district?
Yeah,
Okay,
so
that's the
HARC will
criteria. Okay.
Review them as they do now.
Got it.
And I just want to emphasize this doesn't mean that HARC won't review projects outside of the historic district. It just means that these pretty standard, relatively small projects under 2,000 square feet, which generally take even HARC, a short time to review,
Mhm.
could be reviewed at the chair level. And HARC would continue to see large scale projects even outside the historic district.
Okay, thank you.
20 seconds by one person is better than 20 minutes by 7.
that math. Okay.
So I have the red line in the presentation if we want to go through it, but before we do that, I just wanted to bring up a couple of other issues that this kind of rewrite also brings up. The first one is that obviously it will likely cause more chair level reviews. There's a concern of giving too much responsibility to just the chair. So there are a couple of ways to handle that. One is that we could rotate between the chair and vice chair. For example, Mark could do 1 month, Stacy could do the next month, and we rotate. Or another idea is that we actually just form a small committee of the chair and vice chair who do all of those chair level items together at the meeting. If there's a tie, or if you can't agree, it could be elevated to the full board. This is specifically something that town council wanted HARC's input on, because they didn't have strong opinions about this yet, but they really did want to hear from especially the board and the chairs about the additional responsibility and how to manage the additional authority, I guess.
I'll start off, since I've been to 96 of these. If it's going to be 3 to 5 per month, I don't have any problem with the chair position doing it, subject to other people's input here. But the other thing is, I am totally open, and I think any chair would be, to, I don't know about alternating, but saying, why don't you take a couple? Because it also builds experience with the vice chair of doing things, and maybe gives a different, I don't know what the rhythm would be, but I don't have a problem shouldering it, but I am totally open to ad hoc saying to the vice chair, can you take this week? I don't think we need both of us attending a meeting like this. I mean, it just should be one person.
It seems to me that a co-chair would complicate things. I mean, playing devil's advocate, the co-chair might, or the vice chair might see something that the chair and staff doesn't see, but we often disagree. So wouldn't that cause some confusion, some difficulty for the applicant applying for something that's going to a chair review and then having it maybe often elevated to a board review and would you get kicked in the queue back further down, or would you get in the next meeting?
Haven't thought that through.
It seems to me like having both chair and vice chair review chair items is counterintuitive to the goal here. The goal is to simplify these items, which are should be inherently fairly simple. It seems to me that if the chair or the first vice chair for that matter bumps up against one where they perceive there might be a disagreement, then as Mark said, it's going to get elevated. It probably would have been elevated already, and if not, then it probably will be. I mean, since I am the first vice chair, I'd say Mark, do as many as you can and I'll do the others.
Then you and I work it out.
I don't think it needs to be it doesn't have to be a calendarized, agendized thing of which person's going to be where or on which month. We don't have to alternate that rigidly, like you do all the months that end in Y and I do all the others. I mean, I don't know.
I think we're hearing also Mark say he doesn't mind the workload. And I think if we went down this route and it became too much, you'd probably raise your hand and say,
Oh, yeah.
can we go back?
I'm retired.
One comment, we can't customize this specifically to Mark, because as much as we all hope he would stay on forever, I don't see that as a possibility. So let's think about, 5 years from now. What does that look like for a chairperson?
To me, if you accept the nomination for either chair or vice chair, you should know what that entails. If you're not okay with it, if you don't think you can manage that, don't accept the nomination, I suppose. But it's a long-winded way of me saying, I don't think we both need to show up at the same meeting.
Agree.
And their recusals are automatically force the first vice chair to do something no matter what. I mean, geographically, or I know somebody, or I agree with Stacey. I don't think we need it. Even I'm trying to look 5 years in the future, and I hate to lock and bind somebody else into a rule of every 3 meetings you have to do it. I just feel we should leave it more open. That's my opinion, but welcome any other comments.
I think status quo is fine for right now.
I agree.
You want to say something else?
No, I'm in agreement.
Okay. Noted. The second thing, which won't concern the board too much, but if some of our current small scale applications are moved to minor scale status, I believe that, actually the noticing requirements are reduced. For small scale applications, a letter and a sign is required. Letters are required to be sent out to all the neighbors. For minor scale applications, just a sign is required. And so the concern here is that the neighbors will not be getting the same level of notification for even a new construction of a house in their neighborhood as they would under the small scale application or full board review. And so we're proposing to revise the noticing requirements for minor scale applications. And I think there will also be a threshold for that. It won't be for all minor scale applications, but for new construction and additions over a certain size that it will impact the neighborhood. People will get letters instead of just a sign.
And you're coming up with that threshold? Or-
Yes,
Okay.
unless you have recommendations.
I think that's appropriate. I think with the amount of second homeowners, out of town folks, that they might be upset when they don't get letters.
Great. And actually Ron is doing a whole rewrite of the noticing language anyway, so it's a good time to make those revisions. Okay, so I don't know from here how you want to proceed. If you have specific comments about some of the proposed changes in the red line, I can go through it line by line. I don't know if that's the best use of our time. Mark, you tell me how you'd like to proceed.
Well, I know we've all read it. It's pretty important change. I mean, this is a seismic
Yes.
change. I hate to well, I'll defer the rest of the board. I weighed in with you, but I probably take 10 minutes to do small scale and 10 minutes to do large scale to go through those, maybe. I think it'd be worth it, maybe, but I'll defer to the board. Whatever you guys think.
I tried to read through everything. Well, I did read through everything, but I tried to be on the lookout for anything that caught my eye and really didn't. I mean, once you get past the premise,
The red
don't
line
need to
is the
review.
hardest document to read. I think it's Exhibit B that I included in your packet is the actual draft of the code language in the new categories. So it's kind of the cleanest version, but I also provided this because it shows specifically the changes. And this is a little bit messy because not everything is going to just be moved to a different category. The actual language will change. And recategorizing this will cause some redundancy. Some of the language will be repeated from the, inside the historic district and outside the historic categories, but I still think that it helps everyone identify their project more quickly and easily, even with the redundancies. But again, at your pleasure, how you'd like to go through this.
I'll defer to the board.
I read through it like Stacy, nothing stood out at me. I think it would be easier to review the exhibit B and or C instead of this chart
Mhm.
because it is a little confusing. So I think we could do that, or if John, if you have anything particular, you weren't 100% sure about the language you used, if you want to bring that to our attention.
I didn't have specific questions about the language. It's based on the existing language. The zone districts, whether it's new construction or an addition, alterations, things like that. It really is just ensuring that everything is captured in this new rewrite.
and is the rewrite being done by, we had a third party help rewrite, so it's, okay.
With the help of staff, Erica and the planners, Ron and Phil, and legal will review this thoroughly before it comes back in a ordinance.
I just know that the last time we had a fairly significant changes to land use code, there were just some omissions that led to headaches down the road.
Yes, and I've anticipated that. And I've included a sentence that says, if an application does not fit into one of these classifications, the director will determine the scale.
That's smart.
Because I'm anticipating that there something will likely fall through the
Good move.
cracks. but-
Could we just look at the exhibits a minute on the, before we conclude? Are you guys okay with that? I mean, or
yes.
I agree with Matt, just going back and forth with these columns, it's not necessary. Stacy said one last look because I remember.
Well, my thought was, when you stare at something for very long, it's so easy to miss things then. I was thinking more of somebody who had a fresh set of eyes kind of idea.
Oh, it sounds like if the whole planning department is looking, sure,
And
at it
legal.
back and forth.
Just a second, I did not have this in the presentation, but I do have it available. So it would be. So, for the most part, it really is just section 207-203 classification of applications. And again, it's a completely new way to categorize these. So we start with activities located inside the historic district. And then it's the residential zone districts, which are everything but commercial, historic, commercial, and accommodations too. And then these items are large scale activities, same as they are now.
John, are you, you
Oh,
need to
gosh,
share?
sorry, I'm talking and not sharing, okay. You can't see my screen from there?
So large scale remains the same pretty much.
Remains the same.
Yeah.
Small scale, again, in the residential zone districts, in the historic district. Would be new construction that is between 950 and 2,500 square feet of floor area. Additions to existing buildings that are between 10 and 25% additional floor area, and it result in a building that will contain more than 2,500 square feet of floor area. Similarly, additions that are more than 25% and result in a building that are between 1,000 and 2,500 square feet of floor area. Relocation and demolitions are broken down a little bit more here than they are currently in code. So relocation of a designated historic secondary structure, so a shed or garage, a non-designated principal structure, that's a non-historic house, primary structure, and a non-rated historic primary structure. And again, this is relocation. This would be moving from one lot to a different lot. We rarely see this. That would be small scale. Similarly, demolitions of non-rated historic primary structures, non-rated historic secondary structures, and non-designated principal structures. Alterations to a landmark interior, again, we rarely see. Certificate of appropriateness extensions, that's the same. A lot of these just have stayed the same. Challenges to the designation of a THAS structure, the designation of a landmark or landmark interior, and repositioning of a historic primary structure. That's moving it on the lot, which we do see frequently. That would still be small scale. Minor scale activities in the residential zone district, in the historic district, would be new construction that will contain less than 950 square feet of floor area, and additions to buildings that will increase the structure's floor area by more than 10%, but less than 25%, resulting in a building less than 2,500 square feet. Again, very similar, except the threshold is changed from 750 to 950. And then we move to the commercial zone districts in the historic district, which are commercial, historic, commercial, and accommodations too. Again, no change to the large scale. Small scale would be new construction that will contain 2,000 square feet, but less than 5,000 square feet. This is bumped up from 1,500 square feet. Additions to existing buildings, again, between 10 and 25%, and result in a building that will contain more than 5,000 square feet. This is in the commercial districts. Minor scale activities are new construction that contain less than 2,000 square feet, and additions to existing buildings that will increase the structure's floor area by between 10 and 25% and result in a building that will contain less than 5,000. And then an insubstantial activity in the commercial zone district would be an addition to a rated building that will increase the structure's floor area by less than 10%. And I have to look, but I think that's new. Is it new? So actually right now, an insubstantial application is an addition to buildings in all zone districts, which will increase the structure's floor area by less than 10%. So that exists. So then we move outside the historic district into the residential zone districts. large scale activities. These are the same, new construction and demolition or relocation. However, I removed additions from the large scale activities outside of the historic district. Primarily because we almost never get those applications. We rarely get a large scale application for an addition. Mostly because houses outside of the historic district are already large for their lots and rarely meet the threshold for a large scale addition. So it didn't seem necessary to keep that as a large scale activity. It is a small scale activity. So we still have additions to existing buildings that would create a structure that is over 2,500 square feet. The new construction, relocation, demolition, extension of a CA, challenges to the designation and repositioning, again, those are all existing. The minor scale activities are all existing as well, except again, this threshold has gone up from 750 to 950. Insubstantial would be demolition of any non-designated structure that exists now in the current code. Moving into the commercial zone districts, large scale again, no change. Small scale activities would be new construction between 2,000 and 5,000 square feet. This threshold has been increased from 1,500 to 2,000 square feet. Additions to existing buildings has not changed. It's a small scale application. Minor scale activities, again, very similar, but the thresholds have changed from 750 to 950. And insubstantial scale activities have also remained the same. And then again, here's kind of that third bucket, which is activities located everywhere in town in all zone districts. We keep reviews and recommendations, as we discussed previously. We would have minor scale additions to buildings that will increase the structure's floor area by 25%, resulting in a building with less than 1,000 square feet. That's existing in the current code. Alteration of a rated structure that does not increase its floor area, that is included in the current code. And the reason that this is included in the all zone districts and all areas of town is because there are 2 rated structures outside of the historic district. And so there is a possibility that we could have an application for a historic structure outside of the historic district, which complicates things a little bit, but it just makes it a little more redundant. Again, these are all still minor scale activities, similar as to existing. Insubstantial scale activities, these are mostly the same. There's one I will bring your attention to, which is alterations to non-historic portions of a designated historic structure that do not increase its floor area. For example, this could be a more recent addition on a historic house wants to replace their windows. They're not touching the historic portion, they're just touching the non-historic portion. And I think that it's different. I mean, it's not the historic structure. So we would rather have that as an insubstantial scale application. Insignificant alterations to a designated structure, such as replacement of non-historic windows and doors. If the windows have already been replaced, they're not historic, then you're not losing any historic material. We think that should be an insubstantial level application. Same for in-kind replacement of roofing material. If it's a standing seam metal roof or it's a wood shingle roof and that's what they want to replace it with, no change in appearance, that should be insubstantial or staff level. Any replacement or repair of architectural features that restore the structure to its historic appearance, or replacement or repair of features that don't change the appearance of the structure. It's really just repair. And then mechanical equipment like solar panels that don't have any impact on the house. And typically that would mean on roof slopes that can't be seen from the right of way or can't be seen from the public way. So those are the changes to the residential scale applications. Everything else is
Wow.
existing.
This was a lot of work. Everybody good with this?
I'm gonna quiz you all now.
Good luck.
Thank you, Jonna.
Any feedback or suggestions or clarifications?
I just want to ask, and I know it's in there someplace, if you have historic windows that are being restored in place or they're they're in damaged condition and they're being taken back to original condition.
I think that would fall under this number three, a replacement or repair of architectural features that restore the structure to
Right.
its historical appearance.
I think you nailed it.
Thanks. It's
Thank you.
very well done.
Big step. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, everybody okay? Move on. Okay. All right, we will go to our first public hearing item and the recusal on this item is Kiernan.
I am recused for relationship with the homeowner, employment relationship.
So the project title, why you setting up, is 240 East Gregory. It's consideration of an application for a final large-scale new construction in residential zone district would contain more than 2,500 square foot. A floor area pursuant to land use code 7203A1. It's block 33, lot 9R, town of Telluride at 240 East Gregory. It's in the HR zone district. Owner Franz Grassman and Margaret Taylor. Applicant Dylan Henderson, Sold Architects. Staff member Erica Jensen.
Thank you. All right. This is the final large-scale review at 240 East Gregory. The preliminary review was seen and approved at the June HARC meeting. It is in the historic residential zone district and the historic residential treatment area and is located inside the historic district. The project proposes the demolition of a non-contributing without qualifications house and shed, which was approved June 15, 2022. And the new construction of a 2,899 square foot house and 397 square foot garage. So we'll go through the conditions of preliminary approval from the June 15, 2022 meeting. Condition 1 was to further step down the building to Willow Street. The east gable now steps down 3 feet from the north-south crossing gable. Condition 2 was to further consider articulation on the north main gable elevation to emphasize a more vertical proportion. A gable was added on the north elevation. Staff encourages the board to discuss if this added gable helps to achieve a more vertical proportion. Condition 3 was to further define the entry. Instead of a shed roof, a small gable roof was added to put emphasis on the front door. Condition 4 was if wood shakes are proposed, revise the wood shakes to a more appropriate material. And condition 5 was to revise the wood shake shingle siding and roof to be a more rustic material. The applicant has changed the shingles to a composite material, and on the garage, elements of corrugated metal have been added as siding and the roof material to make it more rustic alley structure. Condition 6 was to reduce the amount of paving in the parking area. Gravel has been added in between the concrete driving strips. So the amount of paving was reduced, but replacing it with some greenscape or pavers might be more effective at breaking up the large surface area paving and monotone color. Condition 7 was to provide details on the trash and recycle, which is now located on the east side of the garage. Condition 8 was to provide a more detailed landscape plan, which has been provided. Condition 9 was to show the location of bike storage, which is now located in the garage. Condition 10 was to take away one skylight towards the north and one skylight has been omitted. New proposed conditions. Condition 1 is to consider greenscape or pavers to reduce the amount of paving in the parking area. Condition 2 is to consider further articulation on the north elevation to emphasize a more vertical proportion. This condition was retained from the preliminary review. Staff encourages the board to discuss if the applicant achieved a more vertical proportion in the new plans, or if there's still too much of a horizontal emphasis. Condition 3 is to reduce the number of can lights as to not duplicate fixtures. The guidelines speak to making sure that fixtures do not light the same area, and there are places where 2 fixtures are lighting the same area. And condition 4 is to offer the structure and materials for salvage or sale, for sale or salvage and or recycle as much of the materials. And I am happy to answer any questions before we hear from the applicant.
Questions for Erica?
I have a question. Eric, on your condition number 1. So it seems that from the last application, they took out some concrete in the driveway and put some gravel. That condition is retained.
Yes.
I sort of tried to take a look at it and see if they could carve out any more driveway. It seemed like they might be able to do a little bit, small amount on the east side next to the stepping stones to the house. Was there any other areas or anything you could expand upon with that? condition?
No, I think the applicant did a good job reducing the paving. It was just replacing it with gravel, still maintains kind of that monotone color where it might not look like it's broken up. So maybe replacing it with some greenscape or some ground cover, and that paving strip might be more effective, that the illusion of breaking up the pavement.
Where is that again exactly you're talking about?
Underneath the-
Yeah, I know that. Are you talking about additional, like between that parking area and the garage? Possibly
As far, sorry, what are you asking?
adding something different, either pavers or a green pavers or gravel between where the 2 cars are parked on the property and the entry to the garage.
I think my condition was more speaking to the gravel between the concrete driving strips. Maybe that could be a different material that doesn't look quite as similar to the paving.
But no additional areas.
No, I think they did a good job reducing the amount of paving. Just maybe a different material.
Okay.
Gravel versus green. Hey, you mentioned in the narrative, I mean, they have to have the retaining wall, but you ask us to take up discussion about concrete board form. You mean or a softer rock looking material, or what were you thinking?
Yeah, I can't speak to what else could be used because I am not an engineer, rockfall fences, but it is a pretty modern material and very visible, and this is in the historic district. So I thought it was just something that could be discussed if the board feels it's an appropriate material.
Other questions?
I have a question, and this could be for the applicant as well. In the June packet, that sort of existing vehicle barrier that's on the Gregory side in front of the board form was shown in the perspectives, and now it's gone. Is that omitted or just taken out? Is it still in there and not shown, or was that removed? That might be it.
I think Dylan can answer that for you.
Okay. All right, let's hear the applicant.
Hello, Dylan Henderson, Salt Architecture. So good to meet you, Andrew. I haven't seen you before. I think we've met before, but I'm not sure. So yeah, if we can go to that would be great. So Eric already went through the conditions and how I responded to them, so I won't spend a lot of time on that. The guardrail is still in place, so it's just not on the rendering. So I'll just go to kind of the comments, the 1 through 4. I guess I'll start with the easy one. As we know, this is located on a really tough corner, right? There's a lot of ice that builds up along Gregory. There's trash trucks that slide down the hill in the middle of winter because there's no snow melt on that street. And so I think when we were looking at this paving, and how this was going to work, let's see if this laser works. It seems like it does. Anyway, it was difficult to figure out how to reduce the paving any further without complicating getting trash cans out to the street and having those trash cans sit on a surface that was snow melt. So I think the paving is reduced sort of as far as we can. In terms of the green, I've done green in between paving strips, and it can work, but it has to be irrigated and then it has to be maintained. And oftentimes those strips, unless they are maintained, just get to this, unless they are maintained, don't end up looking very good. And so I think we could entertain, just trying to see, yeah, it's in this area right here next to the garage. I think we could entertain a different type of material, but I would say that it would be like a colored rock or a colored gravel, that it wasn't just a pea gravel or something to that effect. I'm just a little concerned that the landscaping there would be difficult and may just end up dead and not looking fantastic. So that sort of answers that in terms of what I think would work well. On the north elevation, the comment was, I guess we'll go back and, you know, to Erica's point, we stepped that down to 3 feet. I think there was a condition that Mark had facing east just to further define those two gables, and did that. And then obviously the gable roof over the entry to further define that. I think the hard one is this north elevation. A lot of houses in that zone district that go down Willow Street have very clean lines as they go east to west on their lots. They don't have sides of houses that are broken up because the lots are so tight in that area. And so I think the comment made in the last meeting by Stacy, I think, was that it would be good to add an additional gable in this area just to give more definition to that wall and to break up the horizontal nature of that wall. And so if we go to the floor plan, because this laser's not working, this whole area of the house, so we have a foot bump out where that used to be a full plane. We moved the staircase in order to accomplish that. And so you can see from a floor plan standpoint, it sort of works really nicely with the stair fitting into that niche essentially that we've created on the outside of the building. And it's my opinion that that is a very Telluride-esque elevation, that you have a higher gable with a further defined gable below it. That's defining program within the house. And I think it does accomplish that sort of breakup of that elevation, even though there's a lot of houses in that area that don't have those breakups on those elevations. So I'm hoping that we can support that. And I think the other comments in there were all satisfied within the plan. And that's fine, putting them up for salvage, that's sort of part of our demolition narrative anyway. So understood that that's what we have to do. So I'm happy to answer any questions though.
Okay, questions, anybody?
I was gonna ask, you go back to the north elevation
Oh, yeah,
or the perspective of it, whichever one you want to do.
yeah, I can go to the perspective.
Looking at the previous design, would you consider, or did you consider keeping the vertical it's rusted metal at the gable itself, which they tend to look like an addition to the house, and rather than having it go into that plane and continue with the horizontal siding, but have the pop out as well. So you just have the small rusted steel shed element, and then the gable with an inside gable. And right now, I believe that the roof on the pop out is in line with the main roof. Correct.
Mhm.
I wonder if you consider pushing just the roof out a little bit further, so there is some definition between the two elevations. Or two parts of that elevation.
I think I followed that in terms of the material, but are you saying keep?
Just the rusted metal would stay where you had it before. In the shed. And then the big gable and the small gable, the surface would be the same siding.
Yeah.
I think that breaks it up, but you still maintain that shed-like element in the back.
Definitely consider that.
Did he answer your second question? The material change, and were you trying to gain more space on the right side as we're looking at that? Rather than snugging up against the gable, under the gable?
I don't have
You
a
okay?
problem with that. I think that
Okay.
the roof, just the roof itself, if it came out, would help
Oh, I see.
define that a little better.
Okay.
I have a couple questions.
Questions? Yep.
Dylan, just a couple quick questions. So this, on this north elevation, the smaller gable that you added, is there anything from setbacks or floor area restrictions that's keeping you from pulling that out an additional amount?
Yeah, so we were asked in the previous application, there was something that I didn't mention. We moved the house 18 inches to the south because the neighbors were concerned about the proximity of the house to Gregory casting a shadow, additional shadow. So my client was friends with the neighbor and said, well, I want to accommodate that. So we've already moved the house 18 inches to the south. And so moving further to the north with anything, I guess I would be concerned that I'd get back into that comment.
Thanks for clarifying that. That gable though is lower than your main roof ridge though, so shadow wise, that probably wouldn't.
Great.
And then my second question is, I'm seeing in the drawings, that is a belly band that you've got kind of wrapping around the majority of the building, right?
Yes. Yes.
Those are all my questions.
Okay. You're talking about the retaining wall?
No, I was talking about sort of the horizontal belly band.
Oh,
change in
okay, I see.
material.
All right.
It's sort of exaggerating the horizontal nature of that to me.
Okay.
You know, I'm just clarifying that that's not a graphic thing that I'm seeing. on the
Okay.
drawing.
And Dylan, is there anything material wise to soften up? That's an awful long retaining wall. It's, she mentioned it in the write-up. It was not a mandated condition, but is there any creative to soften that up a little bit or break it up? I don't know.
So that's the guardrail that's there.
Oh, that's just the existing.
Yeah, for some reason, I don't,
Oh, I'm sorry.
that's the existing guardrail that's there. And for some reason, it just.
All right.
moves out.
The wall is the guardrail?
It's not a wall.
This is not. a wall.
Yeah.
This is a mistake.
Yeah, sorry, we took it literally.
Yeah, it's the existing guardrail. Somehow that wall goes to that.
So what we see on the plan, the long,
I'll show you the photo.
I think it calls it out as a
If you have a photo of that guardrail. Well, it's in the
3-foot tall concrete wall to be placed along north property line per recommendation for rock fall mitigation reinforcement existing guardrail as needed.
Yeah, so. You have the report, calls for this rockfall mitigation wall, right?
Mhm.
And then we have the existing guardrail. That rockfall mitigation wall shouldn't go past that guardrail. The guardrail is the same height as that rockfall mitigation wall. It should be stopping at the extent of that guardrail.
Oh, okay. So it doesn't continue on all the way up and,
That was my question.
and how high is the
The existing
wall?
guardrail,
the
it'll
new,
match the top of the existing guardrail.
which is 3 or 4 feet, 3 feet, something? Yeah.
3 feet, 36 inches.
Okay, that helps understand that better.
Dylan, Stacy on this screen has got a drawing from one of your previous applications. Is that way to bring that?
So that's what,
image up?
I'm referencing the June packet.
Yeah,
That's got the existing guardrail in front of,
yeah.
and was that not correct? This
No,
is what you have now.
Right, so public works, so there's a geohazard requirement, right? That says that where that guardrail doesn't exist, we're gonna have to add this concrete wall. And so we had the guardrail in place with a concrete wall that's supposed to be stopping at the extent of that guardrail, because I can't imagine they're gonna make us put that concrete wall the whole way, right? Okay. So
So when you, for the new concrete wall you're putting in, how much of that is exposed? Is that 3 feet high as well?
Yeah.
All the way across,
yes, from the.
following
that
the
guardrail
contour down?
Yes,
You're just effectively extending that existing guardrail with concrete down to your
Exactly.
driveway.
exactly. Yeah, and I'm sorry for the confusion.
It's okay. And the existing guardrail satisfies the geohazard.
It certainly should. Yeah, I don't think, I need to dig into that with Public Works a little bit more as we work towards the building permit. But the answer is yes, it absolutely should. Because we have a lot of uphill structures shielding that. So it'd have to make it through a couple of houses. before it got here. Yeah,
Big rock.
so it is something I need to work through.
Okay, other questions? All right. Thank you. Let's hear from the public. Any public comment? If so, electronically, please raise your hand. Kathy, we stood in your driveway looking at this project.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say, I still support this project. Yeah, I'm probably the most affected adjacent neighbor and owner. And I like the changes they've made. And I also will say that parking is the most important thing in our neighborhood. So you're not diminishing their parking, but make sure you don't. And then I'd also like to go on a grandstand I thought I'd never have to go on again. Board form concrete. When I came to this town in 1979, there were a lot of very funky, wonderful concrete walls, some of the low retaining walls, 3 or 4 feet tall here and there, that were all made from board form concrete. Most of them have been removed with the replacement of new houses or restoration. Everybody thinks they have to have so fancy stone. So I worked really hard like 20 years ago or 25 years ago to get people to understand how historic board form concrete is in our community. And I'm sorry that I can't show you examples or tell you right off the top of my head of any that still exist that haven't been encased in tragically in stone. But I think we want to have more board form concrete in our historic district, not less.
Okay, thank you.
That's it.
Any other public comment?
I see none.
Okay, we'll move on. Any rebuttal to those wonderful comments?
No.
Okay. You accepted them. Imagine that. Deliberations, as we always start, the first 4 conditions Erica presented. If you have any issue with any of those, otherwise, tell us you concur. And if you have any additional conditions, we'd like to hear from you, whoever wants to start.
I'll start. I agree with staff's conditions 1 through 4, with the exception of number 2. I would strike consider. I would encourage the applicant to further articulate that north elevation.
Let me ask a question. Bob asked for maybe material change. Does that satisfy what you're suggesting, or do you think it would take both, or just yours?
Personally, I would like to see a little bit more of articulation, whether that's the actual building wall moving out or a combination of walls moving in and out, and or the roof moving. I think material change, potentially getting rid of the belly band in certain areas there, would further help that. I think Dylan's heard us talk and might hear some more people talk. So I don't think we should be more specific. I think he's here.
All right.
What we're saying.
I agree. I think there's definitely been a considerable improvement from what we saw in June. The introduction of this offset gable definitely mitigates the horizontal nature of that elevation. to me, it's a little bit unfortunate that the previous corner at the east end of the main gable form went away entirely. You could argue that it either went away or it just moved. It moved over. I can clarify that some. Basically, now what we have is we have a shed form which looks like an addition, which does really good things on that northeast corner to bring down the mass and scale. But that elevation, that facade, that plane just continues up into the main gable. To me, not distinguishing between those two forms should be different. It doesn't have to be different by a lot. It could be different, you know, a small corner or even just a vertical trim board is missing. And then, yeah, certainly I don't think it's necessary for that, the horizontal belly band to wrap all the way around the house. That's a definite reinforcement of the horizontal. And then since I have the floor, I'll just say that I think, like Kathy Green said, the parking here is of a paramount concern. Definitely reducing the amount of hardscape to facilitate percolation of moisture, you know, into the ground is a good goal to have, and the applicant's done that. In terms of turning that into greenery, it seems pretty clear to me that there will be a vehicle or two on that all the time. I don't know how practical. I don't want to force the applicant into something that's impractical.
What about doing pavers instead of the gravel?
He had pavers and gravel,
I think
didn't he?
what I read from Erica is I think she's actually suggesting just the gravel become greenscape. If that's pavers and that's putting in more hard surfaces, right, less permeable surfaces, even if you have it in a bed of gravel.
Yeah, I think under perhaps different circumstances, there are instances in town where this has been done very successfully. I can think of a project on Pacific. I can think of a project just on North Fur, where having pavers with the softer scape, green scape has been done successfully, but those were in south facing locations with very little, let's put it, many other parking options. In this case, that is the parking for this
Yeah.
project.
That's the difference, yes.
And that's the difference.
Okay, so just going down the line, I concur with these two about the further articulation to be left to the applicant. It's already made a pretty good change, and a material change, as Bob suggested, and this horizontal belly band, yeah, a deletion, and maybe something in this northeast corner, either trim piece or cutting back that overhang gable. I support all those. I have no additional conditions. Bob?
I don't have any other conditions. I agree with your language for the number 2. But they not consider, but they further articulate it.
And the material change that you suggested, how would you word that?
That well, I'll say it and then you can summarize it into a sentence. I guess that the vertical corrugated metal remain at the under the shed roof as it appears in the last iteration, and that the horizontal siding be on the entire center gable space there with the additional gable. So something like that.
No.
I think that explains what I was talking about.
Could I offer a different way to, without
That'd be
being so
great.
specific, could we revise that condition to say further articulate massing and materials on the north elevation to emphasize a more vertical proportion? That way, we're asking to do things in form and things in materiality, but not being super specific. And he's heard several comments on ways to adjust that.
I can go with that. I think he heard it. So that he's gonna delete the belly van and do something on that northeast corner and the materials and the further articulation. That sounds like we have unanimity on that. So if you're okay with that language, Bob. So we'll let you work on the revised number 2. And are we all agree to strike number 6? That was pavers versus, she suggested put something green, well,
That was one.
Number 1.
or, sorry, number 1. Something green, but I mean, I think we all see it's not gonna grow. So what do we do?
I'd be fine striking or leaving it because it says consider.
Oh. And does say alternative material type, maybe he actually mentioned a different material type might be a little softer, so, okay. So really, it's about number 2 revised and that's it, and I think we're ready for a motion, right?
Sure. What Drew first got in.
I don't have anything. I'm in
Okay.
agreement.
I'll make a motion.
I move to approve the proposed final large-scale new construction at 240 East Gregory, Block 33, Lot 9R, Town of Telluride, based on the findings in the staff memo dated September 21st, 2022, and with the following conditions. 1, consider greenscape or pavers to reduce the amount of paving in the parking area per HR 16.b.2 and C.2. Further articulate the north elevation to emphasize a more vertical proportion. I could add in both form and material per HR 17.d.3 and HR 18.a.1.
Good.
And 3 and 4, as stated in the memo, this motion is based on evidence of testimony provided public hearing held on September 21, 2022, with the notice of such hearing provided as required by the Telluride Land Use Code.
I'll second.
Okay, Stacy, want to vote?
Stacy, yes.
Matt, yes.
Mark, yes?
Bob, yes.
Andrew, yes.
Unanimous. Thank you.
Wanda.
Do I go to come back to chair for the final review? Is that how that's? done?
Yeah, it's just
Okay.
goes to staff 1 step.
Okay.
Right. And so before we start the next project, I'm going to turn it over to Stacy and let her introduce it. I have a recusal based on a 75-foot away. I have ownership interest in a property. So if somebody, well, there he is, as I say, text Kieran and I'll listen on the radio and I'll see you shortly, Stacy.
Sounds great. So the next item, the project title is 805 Shadow Lane, Tobin Residence. Summary is a consideration of an application for a small scale new construction in the residential zone district, which will contain no more than 2,500 square feet of floor area per LUC -203.b.1.b. And B, an insubstantial scale demolition of a non-designated structure within the HPOD, but outside of the THLD per LUC 7-203.d.7. The legal description is lot 16, block 25, East Telluride Edition. The address is 805 Shadow Lane. The zone district is residential. The owner is Michael H. Tobin III. The applicant is again Dylan Henderson with Salt Architecture, and the staff member is Erica Jensen, the historical preservation planner.
Thank you. All right, we are here for the final small scale review at 805 Shadow Lane. The project is located on the south side of Shadow Lane. It is a relatively flat corner lot with wetlands on a large part of the south end of the lot. It is in the residential zone district in the east-west Telluride and River Park corridor overlay treatment areas, and it is outside the historic district. The project description is for the demolition of a non-designated principal structure that was built in 1994 and a small-scale new construction of a 1,787 square foot structure. Staff has found that all standards for demolition have been met and addressed by the applicant. Condition 1 is to significantly reduce the size of the chimney on the west facade. The guidelines encourage building components that are similar in scale to those used historically. The proposed chimney is out of scale, with what was historically seen. Condition 2 is to revise the windows on the southern facade to be a more traditional size and arrangement. The proposed triangle window pattern is not a traditional placement or grouping to what was seen historically. Condition 4 is to reduce the amount of glazing on the southern facade. Condition 5 is to revise the floor pack of doors to be no more than 2/3 light. Both of these conditions are included because of the concern over light spill, especially in the River Park corridor and because of the wetlands on the lot. Condition 3 is if wood shakes are proposed, revise the wood shakes to a more appropriate material. Wood shakes are not an allowed material, so clarification is needed on what material the applicant intends to use. And lastly, here's the proposed motion for demolition, which has been included in your packet. I'm happy to answer any questions and before we hear from the applicant.
Does anyone have any questions?
I have no questions.
Then we'll turn it over to the applicant.
So I'm back again, John Henderson, Salt Architecture. So I did the house next door for Michael and Elizabeth Tobin. And that is just finishing up. So I don't know if anyone has walked past that house, but it's looking great. So the house next door to Michael became available. Eric sold the house to him. And the existing house that's there is in really poor shape. It has a lot of structural and mechanical issues, I would say. And so they're going to hope to demolish that house. And then this house will be specifically a music studio for Michael. He's a musician. And so this is where he'll play music. And so essentially it's a studio for him. It is a small scale. I'm just going to go to the survey so I can point out the buildable area on this lot. That's for the flat. So all of the building has to be north of that line. So it's a very confined building footprint area, which, generated this very sort of small house that we're proposing on the lot. And so you can see from a site plan standpoint, we're sort of laid out in that constrained area. The garage is on the east side, and then the main house obviously is on the west side with the entrance right off of Shadow Lane. So we have a small media room, mech room back behind it. So this has essentially an upstairs, but it's sort of a loft style bed and bath on the upper level. And then sort of a simple arrangement of roofs. So this is a very, what I would consider to be very sort of simple roof lines and simple structure, and not really challenging anything in that regard. And I appreciate the comments on the south facade. I think we can discuss that and see what you all think would be appropriate. I thought that the chimney was sort of a fun feature to ground that side of the house. If we want to see a reduction in scale, that's also can be considered. But I really don't have too much to say other than that this was a very confined building footprint, replacing the existing house with something that's going to architecturally be similar to what we did next door. Happy to answer any questions.
Wow, everybody's full of questions on this project. I have one. Have you considered, I walked out there and noticed that there's only these two houses on that piece of block. And the house next door has a narrow net landscape area. And the existing house is basically paved all the way around the front of it with this orangey looking stuff. I don't know what it is. But would you consider introducing some landscape into that space in the front and possibly even just an entry feature at the door and not that concrete piece in the front? Really, it's less than 3 feet, I believe, and you couldn't even set a chair on it. It's kind of,
I mean, we have the introduction of these trees. On this eastern property line,
Mhm.
through the plans here. And why isn't that front entry stoop if you wanted to see a softer material there?
I think it would enhance it, that maybe it's just articulation at the door and not the large suspended roof, and eliminate the skinny concrete step and make that more of a landscape area.
Yes. Yeah, I would consider that.
And in the patio, it's a little bit bigger in the back, but is that also limited by the
Wetland.
wetlands?
Mitigation.
Nothing can go in there at all, right? Nothing like that. Okay.
Yeah.
That's all I had.
Anyone else? I'm not necessarily logged into the meeting. I can't see if there's any public comment.
Just call for them to raise. their
Okay.
hands.
We'll now open up to public comment. I don't see anyone here in person. If we have anyone joining us from the internet who'd like to comment, please raise your hand. Oh, seeing no public comment, we'll take it back then to board discussion. Karen, you want to start?
Sure. Just regarding the staff motion, it's frameworthy. Ready to go. I have nothing really else to add. I think this is a pretty restrained project in general. Simple.
I'll agree. Being outside of the historic district, being south facade so far set back from Colorado Avenue, we do want to be, I'm mindful clearly of light spill nevertheless. So I think the motion regarding reduction of thing, especially in the 4-pack of doors, try and pull up the elevation right now. For those shown as 2/3 light currently, I don't think they are, nor are they, I think, required to be. They are required to be. Yeah, so an introduction of 2/3 light obviously will reduce the amount of glazing and light spill. And then the form of the wind, it's not being outside of the historic district, the form I don't have an issue with. It's the sheer square footage of glazing. That's the issue to me. I agree with the chimney. It's a cool element, but considering it's a direct vent gas fireplaces. Maybe it's bring down the scale of that a little bit. That's all I have.
I agree with Kieran. I think Erica captured conditions perfectly. I have no other issues. To Bob's kind of question or comment, I would be fine if Dylan wanted to incorporate that. I also don't see a reason that he would need to per the design guidelines. I'm sort of looking at this elevation and wondering, or thinking it might be nice this is an element to sort of keep snow off the front door and kind of away from the building and this northern facade. That's all I've got.
Okay. I'm open to looking at other ways, but I do believe that there should be not just keeping that whole front yard paved, that introducing some landscaping.
I would agree with that. It seems this rendering up front makes it seem like there's some concrete there, but the landscape drawing is absent of a note there. I'm assuming that that's all greenscape where it's not shown
Is that correct?
concrete.
Because it looked like it was still the concrete. That is greenscaped. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I didn't realize that that's what you had here. Let's
Yeah.
see.
It'll essentially be from V-pan to the front entry stoop greenscape.
Well, it says here, existing concrete sidewalk, curb and gutter, existing curb and sidewalk remain unchanged unless damaged during construction. So that's what I read, and it seems to me that that's,
Well, just that
Supposed to
curb
be
and
off.
gutter. Just the curb and gutter, because the sidewalk, Public Works is making us remove that sidewalk entirely.
okay.
So I'm.
It didn't say that.
That was not clear, yeah.
Okay.
Is there a way for you to zoom in on this
We
plan
are
we're talking about?
past, we're past the, we're in deliberations.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
So on this plan, which is on page A 2.1, there is a hatch. I think where Bob is concerned that that's concrete. And I'm not seeing a note that's describing what that hatch is. I'd like to ask the applicant. what that
2.1?
hatch- A 2.1. So Bob, this sheet here.
One point two.
Sorry.
Okay. Here we go.
Apologies.
So Matt, you're requesting to open it back up to the,
I just would like the applicant to clarify what that hatched area is.
I think it's fine.
Is that fine?
Yeah.
I know that we have this existing concrete curb and gutter, and that this existing concrete sidewalk, Public Works is requesting that we do that on this western property line. I think that's a coordination issue on my side, because we just haven't talked about that, but the building units therefore, that the intent is that this is our driveway that matches that curb and gutter, and then we have sauce that curb and gutter in front of your step.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, it was just unclear.
Yeah, I understand. Sorry about that.
Okay, I think that answers my concerns.
I don't have anything else is handled in the conditions. Bob, do you want to make a motion? You're going to be the only person that might have something to add.
Okay. I can do that, and I have the call out for that. I move to approve the small scale application for new construction at 805 Shadow Lane, lot 16, block 25 ETA, based on the findings in the staff memo dated September 21st, 2022, and with the following conditions. One, significantly reduce the size of the chimney on the west facade per EWT number 25B. Revise the windows on the south facade to be more traditional size and arrangement per EWT number 29A, B, and D. If wood shakes are proposed, revise the wood shakes to a more appropriate material per EWT number 28B1. Reduce the amount of glazing on the south facade consistent with ES number 2.B.1 and ES number 4A. Revise the 4-pack of doors to be no more than 2/3 light per ES number 2B1, ES number 4A3, and RPC number 14A4. Do I add my condition at this point? I would say per 30-A-1, redefine the entry more significantly. I don't know what else to say about that, how to say it, but yes, sorry. EWT 30, which calls for a well-defined entry. This motion is based on evidence and testimony provided at a public hearing held on September 21st, 2020, with notice of such hearing provided as required by the Telluride Land Use Code.
Kieran will second that. And Piper, you clear on the number 6?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, Kieran, how do you vote?
Kieran, yes.
In second. Did we? Oh,
I said,
He seconded.
I thought you made them.
He seconded and then asked a question.
I see. Okay.
He did two things. And then you voted yes,
yes, it did.
and then I'll vote yes.
Matt, yes. Bob, yes.
Andrew, yes.
Thank you, guys.
Yes, yes,
Yeah, the
I can do
demo-
that.
Hold on, we need the motion for the proposed demo.
Oh,
I can do that. I move to approve the demolition of a non-designated principal structure outside the TH LD located at 805 Shadow Lane, lot 16, block 25. TA with the following finding, number one is stated, and with the following conditions, number one and two as stated. This motion is based on evidence testimony provided at a public hearing held on September 21st, 2022, with notice of such hearing provided as required by the Telluride Land Use Code. Revised plans incorporating conditions of approval shall be submitted within 60 days of this approval, or this approval becomes null and void. Unless otherwise indicated, the revised drawings submitted for a certificate of appropriateness must be a complete set with any changes to the drawings plotted and labeled. Any changes to the drawings beyond the conditions of approval may result in more than one submittal being required.
A second that.
Karen, how do you vote?
Kieran, yes.
Stacy, yes.
Matt, yes.
Bob, yes.
Andrew, yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Wow. Mark Shambo has returned to the meeting at
I shouldn't have.
7:15 PM.
Noted. I get it. Our third public hearing item is the Roma. Oh, excuse me, a recusal. Matt.
Yes,
Just recuse yourself.
I recuse myself from this agenda item due to an ongoing contractual relationship with Sante Architects.
Okay. Do we have your text? Okay. Okay, the Roma is the next project, consideration of a large-scale application for an addition to existing building in the historic commercial zone district, which will increase the structure's floor area by more than 25% and result in a building that contains more than 5,000 square foot of floor area per land use code 7203884. Legal description is lot 77, block 7, town of Telluride. It's at 133 East Colorado in the historic commercial zone district. Owner, NSAC Incorporated, Colorado Corp. Applicant Sante Architects, staff member Jana Wenzel.
Thank you, Chairperson Shambach. So earlier today, I forwarded public comment from Olivier Simitel via email. Did everyone have a chance to review those comments?
Yep.
And then earlier this afternoon, we did a site walk there and reviewed the story polls with the applicant. So just a reminder that a work session was held on May 18th, 2022, with only 2 HARC members, one of whom was no longer on the board. The rest of you, I believe, watched the video from that work session. So you are all familiar with what was discussed during the work session. So the site is located on the north side of Colorado Avenue, just west of Spruce Street. It is a portion of lot 77R called Unit C, which is mostly vacant except for some existing hardscape, sidewalks and patio and several mature trees. The historic Roma building is to the east, which I will discuss in just a moment. So since 1983, the town has held a historic facade easement on the Roma building, which prevents alterations or additions to the building. So why, you may ask, is this considered an addition to the historic Roma building? So new construction, the new construction proposed will not alter the envelope of the historic Roma building, which you see here on the survey in small. Zoom in a bit. It is occurring on the same lot. The existing Roma building over to and including the vacant portion of the lot is all part of lot 77R. The vacant space to the west of the historic Roma building is called Unit C of the East Colorado Avenue residential and commercial land condominiums. It's part of the Roma parcel, and so that's why it's considered an addition rather than a separate new construction. The Roma building was built around 1885 as 3 separate commercial spaces. The Sanborn maps show that there was a 1-story commercial building on this current Unit C to the west until about 1908 at the least. We see it in the most recent Sanborn map that we have. It was a grocery hardware store, variety store. I did cover a few historic photos from the RGS book. It shows the OK Clothing store, which was on this currently Unit C space. It's now vacant, but it was gone by the 1960s when this photo was taken. Clearly, here's the Roma, and the OK Clothing Store was on this lot that we're discussing tonight. There is a non-historic shed addition on the west side of the Roma building that is to be removed. But no other alterations to the Roma are proposed. So this is a preliminary large-scale application to construct a new mixed-use building addition to the historic Roma building. The new building will be attached to the Roma at the second level, where the new wall abuts the upper portion of the Roma. At the ground level, a breezeway provides access to the residential units in the back and allows the west wall of the Roma building to remain visible and accessible, which is desirable for the historic building. The building is 2 stories at Colorado Avenue on this side, with a 3rd story setback 28 feet from the street. Here's the wall. So it will appear as 2 stories on Colorado Avenue. The 3rd story has a slightly sloped pitch back to the alley. The 3rd level of the alley facade steps down slightly to the 2nd level, but the 2nd level does not step down any further to the 1st level, which is captured in my proposed condition number 1, which is to increase the stepping down to the alley at the 2nd level. Condition number 2 is to revise the 2nd level windows on the south and north facades to reflect a traditional window to wall ratio and simplify the window configurations to a more traditional arrangement. Which the windows that are proposed are appear to be more warehouse style windows, and they seem overly sized for traditionally sized windows. Condition number 3 is to show the location of resource recovery areas and to indicate any rooftop mechanical equipment on the roof plan. And I added a new condition because I found these old photos after I completed and sent out the memo. And so since looking through these old photos, I noticed a small detail, but I wanted to add this condition that the cornice of the Roma building be preserved as it is, with evidence provided in these old photos, especially of this one of the OK Clothing House, which shows the cornice extending a little bit beyond the corner of the building. Peter and I have discussed this detail actually, and I think it's proposed to be removed to accommodate the new portion of the structure that would interfere with the cornice. But it seems it needs to be preserved, not only because it obviously is historic per these old photos, but also because of the facade easement that prohibits altering the details of the historic facade. So I can bring this back up if you like, or if someone wants to make a note of this condition. But other than that, I'm happy to answer any questions, and the applicants and representatives are here.
Okay, thanks. Questions? Go ahead. Anybody?
And just a quick question. Number 3, condition, revise the cornice, windows and kick plate. Are you talking specifically to the storefronts area?
Yes, sorry, I am speaking specifically to the south facade, the Colorado Avenue facade. The cornice seems to be, the cornice mimics that of the Roma building to some degree, but I think in the brick material, it appears out of scale. The kick plate appears to be quite tall compared to the door, the entry door, and the kick plate of the Roma building. And I mentioned, I think that the 2nd level windows on the front appear to be oversized and really out of scale with historic.
Upper level.
Yeah, on the upper level.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? I'll ask one. So on the in the work session, I know I had asked the question about the west stone wall, and the applicant on the sidewalk commented about it, but basically with the breezeway down that hallway, that's sufficient in your mind to be able to still see it.
So I think, I'm sure the applicant will address this in their presentation, but when we were on the sidewalk, I believe Peter said that the
Different.
stucco wall, it's really not a historic stone wall. There is a stone portion above that that appears to be historic, but that below does not appear to be original.
Yeah.
It will still be visible from the breezeway.
Okay. I mean, what I didn't ask before is, could there be historic stone behind it? But I think the answer is no. It's been shaved off or
I
something.
think the answer is no. I don't know if we have evidence of that, and we can ask Peter to speak.
Okay. Okay, very good. Well, let's hear from the applicant, please. You guys want to read your name into the record while you're calling it up?
Screen set up. Bear with me. Am I sharing? You guys seeing my screen?
Nope.
Okay, let me try this. Okay, thank you guys. See my screen. Sorry, Peter Sante Architects, for the applicants. I'm joined here by Ray Farnsworth, one of the owners of the room project, as well as Steve Johnson, attorney.
And Paul Steinberg, a partner at the New Sheridan, is also on Zoom joining the meeting.
So thank you. It's a thrill to be back in Rebecca Hall. It's been a while. Feels very, very appropriate. Glad to hear you new members are familiar. You have seen the short work session we had in May. We had a parking payment in lieu meeting earlier with P&Z and got approval to be forgiven a payout for one parking space. I am going to try and get to these. Right here. Let me. Let's start off here. This is a 1908 Sanborn map, and the property, the larger lot 77R, is shown here in the dashed red line. You can see that the western third, these are three 25-foot wide lots originally. The western of the three to the left here, where we are proposing this development, as you can see, was substantially, if not built upon, corner to corner. I am glad to see that OK Clothing Store. I had not located that down. That was a late entry just today. There we go. That's exciting. And that corresponds with the Sanborn here, showing what looks like a hallway along the west side of that. And it's currently kind of that outdoor walkway. I think that photo showed a doorway on the west edge, which is interesting. And I'll point out to the rear, it's gone. I've not seen photos of the building I'm circling in the back, which color corresponds to a building type of special, which I don't know, could be a catch-all for non-standard frame, non-masonry, non-brick. You see the other colors. But that was there. It gives you the impression it's all 25 feet. I think it was slightly less, because as you'll see when we go to the the last Sanborn, which sadly is in black and white, but it's the one here. You see these two dark rectangles. The larger of the two in the middle is the stone Roma Hotel that's still there. And what is, I'm circling to the left and in the back, you see the gap between those. I have to imagine that when the Roma was built back in 1914 or whatever it was, that those doorways, those rooms, those apartments were accessible by some balcony and whatnot that was there and shot between those buildings, which is what we are proposing here today. I'll make note, there's nothing but saloons on this block.
I was gonna say.
100 years ago, just for reference, we've maybe made a little progress. I don't know, maybe not, but a bakery burned, and that was on the back east corner where parking and such is shown today. Go to another batch of real quick. I want to bring you to a site plan. Sorry. Okay. So, Jonna, we appreciate your detailed staff report. And I just want to address a couple of things here that were kind of low hanging fruit. The area I'm circling now is currently the trash and recycling resource recovery zone behind the Ride Lounge and formerly Honga's. And we are proposing to maintain that, continue to use that, if not improve upon it. And that's where the trash is intended to go. With this, again, make note, we are providing an ADA parking space in an optimal location. For this, we do have parking to the rear along the alley and a breezeway that connects the sidewalk to the alley in the north. So let me get back to this presentation. Okay, so let's get into it. This, as a reminder, and you may have heard it at the work session, this application is trying to maximize 2 stories of commercial space at the sidewalk as much as we could, and below we have a residence above that at level 2 and at level 3. So there's 2 stories of residential and there's 2 stories of commercial. We have some parking and some building services in between. The way the land use code works, we are viewed as an assembly of the uses on this larger block 77R, which are existing other A and B units, commercial, and currently free market old Roma Hotel 6 apartments. Baked into this use by right application here tonight, we are offering 5 deed restricted of the 6 apartments. 3 would be a requirement for the amount of floor area, commercial and residential, that we're adding to that. We are sweetening this with 2 additional. It does work to our favor to balance out these occupancies and the right percentages, but it's a public benefit by anybody's understanding. The work session comments, and glad you guys watched, focused on, I'm going to say, a short list of topics. And one very general one was to increase the visibility and not cover up the currently visible historic stone apartment, former hotel, and the west side of the Roma Ride Lounge, and to open that up additionally. And this view is from north in the alley, looking sort of up that breezeway. And just to describe this, we have pulled the balcony on the 3rd story back considerably to let more light and openness into that. We have removed what was a canopy over that 3rd northern 2nd story unit, more light and exposure. The balconies and stairs are opened up and the stair was flipped, so to increase that visibility as well is a minor thing. There's additional translucent or glass block between the parking. We were required to have a 1 hour separation to the exit stair, but we're adding that as a further measure to open that up visually as discussed. I touched on at the sidewalk, the presence of the kind of the heavy cement or parging, stucco, whatever. I don't think we have a strong desire to tear into it. It was discussed. And so I pointed it out. I'm glad everybody got to see it. I don't think there's any finished looking stone the way you see on the other ones that are very kind of regular and worked. Seems a little more casual and typical, frankly, at Telluride, which seems appropriate based on the Sanborn maps that really wasn't that exposed when it was built. So I don't see a lot of change. I think our goal is to maintain as much of that sort of existing character on that side, unless we are told otherwise or Jonna gets another photo. With that, the other, maybe the top of the list at the work session related again to the alley side and stepping back as you go up, I think. And what we see here in this 3D view is the second floor, I'm circling with the two windows, is 5 foot off the alley, which is the minimum setback to the rear. This existing stone building is sitting on the property line for reference. So we are 5 feet back for our second story closest and 10 feet back for the third story, which had not been the case when we were at work session. So we have recessed that third story back 5 feet additionally as a part of this as well. And let's see, this is just another view of that same north view, more of the existing back of Roma Hotel. Here we go. Here's the story pole plan. There's some photos from the story poles today. Jonna, we have been working on this since 2018, on and off, and
17.
yeah, 17. So for a while, and it's a little surprising, but we learned along the way there was a facade easement that we were not, despite allowables in the land use code, we were not going to be building on top of the ride lounge or the former Roma Hotel. And so just so everybody's clear with this, the owner back in the early 80s, McClellan or McLennan, he owned not where we are or we're proposing our development on Unit C. It was a separate property, but he owned the gray 1 and 2 story historic buildings. And he put a facade easement on that with the town, and subsequently the C was added and put into a single property. And we learned this in some conversation with Kathy Green and others, I think at the town, how that went down. Our development respects that, does not propose anything on A and B. And you can see this is just a kind of a reference sheet for some of the heights, which we saw at the story poles today. I'm gonna scroll some more. We have not really gotten into the fenestration, the window sizes. That was brought up at the work session, and I don't want to dismiss it, but I know this is a large scale activity, and we're hoping to get a preliminary approval and dive headlong into the windows and on that more detailed side. So we are aware the windows are somewhat aspirational. I will point out that just to the front again, the existing 3 storefronts, this kind of nice collage of old timey Telluride, there are some high windows of nice proportions that are similar to a warehouse proportion that we have here in the second story, as well as our commercial, high in our commercial space. So I think in discussion, whether that's tonight or in subsequent meetings about the windows. I think the character of the windows, or just trying to understand from the board. I know what the guidelines say about traditional double hung windows and their sizes. I'm curious to get some discussion whether there's support or dislike of the warehouse concept or smaller rectangular panes, which can be integrated into double hungs, for instance, but just we'll say that's of interest here. This rendering does show the kick plate a little bit lower, Jonna, as you probably are tuned into. I would agree. It used to be at the lock rail. It was 3 feet. It was a little high. And I think historically, this is the range we'd expect it. And we'll correct that moving ahead. We added, as this is a proposal for a brick building on Main Street, we added a little more detail at the storefront, both brick along the west property line edge, which is quite typical. We have a more substantial column on the east side that abuts the Roma to visually support that brick corner and lintel above it. And those columns are repeated, and they had not been in the work session application, but there are a handful of columns you see in plan that repeat down that corridor, and that you see again at the north end, which is reminiscent of the kind of the balcony impression you have back there currently. I will point out, I think Jonna's condition about the proportions in the facade and some of the detailing, the commercial cornice or belt course and things like that. I think I'm understanding. I will say, I think some conversation from the board about what you guys think might be most successful or you'd be interested to see explored would be helpful. This version has changed from the work session, and it's a lot of brick, and you could, and there are plenty of other examples, you don't have to think too hard to imagine, that have the parapet or the cornice at top that are painted and non-brick and just kind of project out more and a little lighter and distinctly different from the brick. And that approach is we're open to, and I think would be worth exploring, because I think some of your comments, Jonna, about the size or the proportion of the brick wall relative to some of the more historic typicals touched on things related to the impression. And I think you could say a similar thing about the top of the commercial or the base of the brick wall, and whether that is more of a commercial cornice that's not brick, but a painted or some other material to cap that. So love to hear conversation on that. I've got 3D axons from every angle that we could chat about, but I think I'm gonna make sure I've touched on every one of your conditions, Jonna. And did you say you added a condition too about the parapet, which we can talk about? We have not, as I said, just going through the list, increase the stepping down at the alley. We did step down, as I described, or stepped back at the 3rd floor. We feel like that, in conjunction with what we are showing and proposing in really increasing the impression of that gap and that openness at the back of the stone hotel, is and in conjunction with this, our goal to have a simple piece that's reminiscent of the back of the stone hotel. There's kind of a nice sort of clarity, simplicity to that we were picking up on, and is referring back to the Sanborn maps as well. We thought might be successful, but we are very interested to hear your discussion, your opinions on item 1. And we have not touched on windows, item 2. We look forward to doing so from here, whether that be at final or when. The cornice, again, touched on, item 3. We are open to suggestions. I think our interest is exploring more lighter projected and painted front-facing cornice. It's no longer a cornice that wraps the east side. I think there was some public comment following the hearing that mentioned that. That's no longer the case. It's just forward-facing. And I touched on item 4, where that trash is located on the northeast corner. And we have indicated in our axon views, where did they go? This one, we have mechanical on the roof in a recessed mechanical well. We're not proposing that be yellow painted, by the way, but that's just to highlight where that area is. And we are aware of the requirement for it to comply with the heights, and we'll do so. And I think that's be the summary of the presentation, and welcome any questions.
Okay, questions?
I have one. With regard to the photograph that Donna presented, with that concept of that facade, not duplicating it, but doing something that was continued the one-story proportion at the very front of the building, be something that you would consider?
Wish I had snapped a picture of that photo. I only just glanced at it. You're
Just not necessarily, you know, I'm not asking you to duplicate that or suggesting that you duplicate that, but to continue that one-story proportion right at the street, and perhaps the second floor could step back a bit. And so you would read that one-story continuation of the Roma and the other buildings, and then across the open space, you have the Butcher and Baker, which is also similar in proportion. And I think the building next to that is still like 1.5, or, you know, that one-story.
La Casina.
Yeah, well, on the other side it is, yeah, but if you continue on the street to the east, you have this one little area here, which is all tends to be 1.5 story kind of facades.
I'm not sure if I'm understanding your question, but I think there was a couple things with the photo, and I know John had pointed out. Sure. Do I need to select something to stop share? All right, here we go.
Mm-hmm.
So seeing the OK Clothing house, it's a one-story building with a tall one-story commercial front above it. No windows. No floor, from the look of it, probably an attic. And so if you're asking if we would be interested in having a one-story front that transitions back, I think that's what you're asked, right?
Mhm.
I think it's challenging for a residential unit to do that at this point. I think we're trying to not get chewed up. I think our preference is to have a two-story building with a third story that steps back, as opposed to a one-story with 2 stories that are 2 additional steps, if that makes sense. I'm not sure what I'm seeing in the photo. I know, Johnny, you mentioned the corner of the Roma parapet at that spot. Are you perceiving, and again, I'm not looking at this maybe as clearly as I should, do you perceive that the front of the Roma to the right and east is at the same sidewalk sort of property line as the OK Clothing house, or is it back? That is the Roma is forward of it, or? I'm just not sure what I'm seeing there. I've put what shadow versus other things, and it's normal for a parapet to project forward, right? Which makes sense, and you see that in both of these. I'm just not sure if 'cause it doesn't feel right to take a notch out. And I'm not sure what I'm seeing here. If you have sort of come to a conclusion on this, I certainly have not what I'm viewing on that front. And if I look closely at the photo on the right, you zoom in on the left edge of the parapet, left of the Coors sign, whether that is all flush or whether it, as it is today, it kind of, it projects out. It looks like it's more flush to the wall below it. And today it sort of wraps the corner, which it projects around the front and then it projects around the west side over unit C. And I'm not sure if these photos are definitive or if anybody else has an opinion what they're seeing. But it doesn't, yeah, do you think the parapet projects out to the west as it does to the front in that 60s photo?
It almost looks like a column just to the right of E on the house. That's going, you know, I don't know what that is.
Well, that's why I walked up to try and get a closer look. It almost looks to me like the buildings are separated. And that's a shadow above the E of the a shadow of the cornice. And that what we're seeing is the mountainside beyond, between the two.
I don't disagree.
Yeah. Yeah. Good idea. Other questions?
I guess I want to go back to possibly look at a different way of saying what I was trying to say, that perhaps you could consider somehow continuing the lines of the 1-story across there. So somebody staying across the street would look and see that there's some continuity to the new facade with the old facades. And that MSC 20 mass and scale talks about maintain the average perceived scale of 2-story buildings and sidewalk. New construction should present a tall 1-story or 2-story facade at the front property line. Talks about facade heights of new buildings should fall within the established range of the block and respect historic proportion, height and width. And historic facade heights of contributing and supporting rating structures must be respected. Since we are an addition to an historic building, I'm just wondering if we could somehow continue that perception of 1-story at the street. And it could be articulated with cornices or, you know, not cornice, but band courses or something that pick up some of those other lines on the Roma building. That makes sense?
It does. I think I will take a pass at that. I think Jana's staff report in a variety of ways describe proportions and relationships at the front, and a cornice above the commercial. Proportionally, I think it could be taller, and I think there's things that fall in line with what you're saying, Bob, about making a more 1-story detail at the facade that reads more like an extension of that 1-story storefront at to the right on site. I will point out, you guys know we have 1-story historic buildings, we have 2-story historic buildings on site. There are 2-story historic other Main Street, the Corset building 3 doors down where the Toggery is a nice good sized 2-story, pretty typical brick historic. Then there's a 3-story as well. So we're on a block with a little bit of everything and sort of vacant lots in between. And I think our we have been more focused on the stepping back from the, trying to get to the overall axon, from the historic buildings, which are east of us at the upper floor, so that we have the appearance of a two-story building that steps back 4 feet from that 25-foot width that we have, which is similar to the breezeway below, just trying to step back from it in that way as well, Bob. So,
I think in combination with looking at something that picks up that one-story feel, that it would probably impact the size of your windows and may you may respond to with that to make the windows more in keeping with the historic character of the other buildings.
I have a question, just to make sure I've got it right before we get to deliberations and we lose you. On the let's do A701, it's probably the easiest place.
that in your
You're drawing A701?
in the package, your package. Okay.
Yeah. So I get the third story, which step back 10 feet. It's 10 feet from the alley. And it was 5 feet at the work session. But the ground level, of course, at the alley, as is the adjacent Aroma Hotel, we've got a 2-story facade straight up without any step back, right, Peter? And I realize it's only half the building. It's narrower because of the stairway, which was a clever way of actually designing that. But right, there's no step back on what I call the 2-story element. It's only at the third, the top story that it steps back 10 feet. Or actually, how far does that step back since our drawings, I
10
can't read?
feet. The third floor is 10 feet off the property line. The second is 5 feet off the property line.
Okay,
And the stone apartments are 0 next
Right.
to us. So we have that kind of range.
and so, all right, so the second story is 5 feet step back from the alley and the third is 10 feet. Okay, so it's another 5 feet.
Yep.
And I just wanted to recap it. Mine.
Yeah, Jana's condition mentions second story, specifically her condition 1.
Yeah,
And I've chatted with her about it. I understand that. I think just since you brought it up, I think the challenge, or one challenge, and you guys might think that's not a challenge and we would be okay with it then, but if, for instance, we were to increase the setback at the second story, push it back additionally, what we have pushed back at the third story is going to not seem as stepped.
I know.
And so to me, the challenge, we started with a 5 foot for 2 and 3, and we stepped back the third story and additionally double that setback. If we increase the setback below, it's just going to make the top floor seem more pronounced. And that is a challenge, but I think that conversation is one I'm curious to get board consensus on.
Well, unless you further step it, not as significantly, but a little bit further back on third story, so you don't lose what you've tried to accomplish with it appearing further back. I mean, if both of these, we'll see what the board thinks, but second and third were back. But anyway, you gave me the dimensions, you've answered it. As far as questions,
Yes, I would simply add, we feel that we've addressed the setback in the alley sufficiently with 5 feet from the alley on the second floor and 10 on the third. So I would just like to offer that we feel that we have addressed that.
I understand that. Okay, and then we're gonna address windows at final, but well, I don't have any more questions. We'll deliberate on that. Questions? No more questions, Andrew, anybody? Okay, well, thank you. Let's hear from the public. Any public comment? Not seeing any. Going once, going twice. Okay, we'll close that.
I don't know if they need to be-
Oh, admin? What's that?
Sounds anonymous.
Electronic hand up. The admin. Please unmute yourself and identify yourself. Name, rank, and serial number. Yeah, please unmute. Wow, that's weird.
Oh, sorry about that. I was having a little bit of trouble. Hi, yeah, this is Stevie. I'm just a resident, and I had a couple questions. I wanted to, first of all, say I really appreciate Jonna and the crew and all the research they did on this. And I was wondering, I talked to a neighbor, the neighbor adjacent to Colorado, and they had asked about the tree removal, basically the tree removal there. Just wanted to find out if that was historic or not relative to the trees, and then also how that ties into some of the the trees being greater than 3 inches in diameter. Just wanted to bring that slight issue up and appreciate all the hard work everyone else has done on this. Wanted to raise that issue. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And we'll see if there's any other public comment. And then if not,
Could we get that person's full name for the record, please?
Yeah,
Sure.
absolutely. Stevie Henson, Hensen.
thank you, Stevie. And comment or rebuttal, I guess.
We planted those trees in the late 1990s.
Wow.
And they are bigger than 3 inches.
Okay. All right. Then we'll begin deliberations. And again, John has got 5 conditions and a 6th being restudy. This old corner aroma cornice, which I think we can maybe hopefully use that term, but everybody agree with 1 through 6 or have any additional conditions?
Yes. I'd like to consider a condition that relates to Main Street commercial number 20 policy mass and scale. As I presented before, that would be A 1, 2, and 3. And to look at policy, or excuse me, item 27, policy detail alignment, the introduction, and A.21, which all relates back to cornices, copings, the detailing of the building.
Okay. Let's take a straw poll on this before we lose it or lose the thought. So Bob's talking about stepping back to preserve this one story look that is only common in one other place in town. That's from the Buck to the Restuco restaurant. Yeah. But clearly, even on that diagram, what page is that on? It shows a 2-story at the sidewalk. And so any comments on consideration of the 2-story facade? And I'm not asking about the windows yet, but which I think need to be a little more traditional, but just like that photo you showed there. But any other comments on that?
Well, so I will say that the items that I was drawn to as I reviewed, the project and went through the guidelines were items that should be considered at the next hearing, the cornice alignments, the mid-belt cornice scale versus the cornice right now, because it seems to me that the upper cornice is quite tall. Even though that perhaps reads stronger in a black and white drawing like it does, and if it were, all the same color brick that was just stepping out the way it does perhaps softer, I'm willing to entertain that notion. But I really was drawn to things that are approval with those conditions. I'm not as concerned, I think, with the mass and scale. I think a 2-story building on this block is pretty consistent. I mean, the 3rd story is set back substantially on Colorado. We can talk about
windows and cornices.
Okay, so just take a straw poll. So you're not concerned about the two-story facade, Kiernan? On
Yeah,
Main Street?
I certainly understand Bob's point with regard to it being considered an addition, and wanting to kind of be more in scale with the one story of the Roma, but I don't necessarily think it's necessary to mimic the feel of a one story there. For nothing else, it would kind of lose the Roma a little bit in it, you know.
Okay.
Potentially.
A two-story building in this location reinforces stepping down to the pocket park, if anything. It's more mass and scale at the center of the block, which I would not necessarily have a policy to support that, even though there probably is one. I think it's having a two-story allocation is appropriate.
Can I comment?
Well, sure, yeah.
I wasn't proposing that it would be, 10 feet back or 5 feet, even 5 feet back. But just that there's an articulation that picks up on the one story and then you see the two story above that. Be, slightly in that slightly different. point.
Stronger mid-belt cornice, if you will.
Yes, a stronger emphasis on the other buildings that are next to it. To bring that line across. I'm not definitely not saying push the whole facade back.
There
The upper
is
part
the
of facade.
diagram under policy 15A. Sides should be aligned at the sidewalk edge. And then there's a rough diagram that
Mhm.
that I think it does what you're.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with it. It's the facade is at the street.
What page is that?
There
diagram?
is,
93.
and it could be just articulation of materials, change of material, something that gives you
Oh.
that continuity across one story group of buildings.
I think if you're talking about more on the material side, I do think that
Material articulation.
Okay,
is supportable.
I could go in for that. I don't think we need, I don't think the guidelines support in any way pushing it back 3 to 5 feet, but
No.
change of material, some articulation there to give a little more strength, yeah, to the first floor, I guess is really what we're saying.
Mhm. Mhm.
Andrew, does that make sense to you?
It makes sense to me.
Okay. This is not black and white issue necessarily, but
This could be, if you look at 27 policy detail alignment, it talks about on the north side of the buildings, more variety mix of 1, 2, and 3-story buildings. New construction should respect these distinctions and those historic structures that are in the immediate vicinity. So again, I'm talking about articulation and materials.
Mhm. And even on page 98, policy 28, the facade elements, again, that diagram shows I guess to your point now that I'm seeing it, a stronger, with that cornice, a stronger look to the first floor. Again, there's no setback, but I mean, I guess you guys are in line with that if it was a,
Supportable, yeah.
I think so, but I think that's. Again, we're looking at a black and white image with no color representation, but isn't that done? We could argue about whether that mid-bell's corner should be stronger.
yeah, I think that's right.
Right, and we could argue about the strength of the upper cornice
Mhm.
perhaps being a bit top heavy, right?
Mm-hmm.
We can have those, but again, back to the original question, we're getting fine with our criticisms. Which indicates to me that it's approved. I think it's approved.
Yeah, I think it is too. Okay, but I'm gonna say I would be on board. I think there's almost unanimous for, I guess I'll use the articulation or material change to make a heavier first floor versus the second, or give strength to the continuity of that one story element running down the street, but no setback.
Correct.
So that's very fair, I think.
It's supportable, yeah.
Okay. So that
You write it.
not yet. Stacy, why don't you work on that language?
I think if you reference 27, the introduction and number and A1.
And 28,
Yes,
Also, you could say 28,
yes.
all of 28, just to make it easy. So that could be a number, if we've got a 6 restudy, corners, well, I don't, yeah. But this could be a 7. Number 7. I'm gonna ask one other question to the board. When I look at, back to A701, can you put that up on the screen? We'll get to it at final. I believe we're headed to final. Hopefully. I look at the 3rd floor. John mentioned the fenestration, more traditional wall window ratio on the 2nd floor. My question is, do you all see the 3rd floor pod sitting up there, those 2 large non-traditional windows on both the east and west elevations on A701 as compliant? I'd just like to get some feedback to the applicant before.
These
they-
here, you're talking about?
Yeah, with all the, well, they're warehouse looking, but, and I think that's a question the applicant actually asked us, is it more of a warehouse looked at with somewhere else in the building, but to me, I looked at maybe that should be either more traditional or some reduction in fenestration would be supportable by the guidelines with the same conditions Jonna quoted for the 2nd level, south and north, but east and west on 3rd floor. Does anybody think that needs to be addressed?
Yeah, I agree with you.
I agree.
At least, I mean, if we want more of, opinion about the warehouse kind of look of the windows, I wouldn't think that's as supportable in the guidelines. But
Okay.
also, I think the window to wall ratio issue as well.
So maybe we could just combine that into number 2.
I would think so.
And say, and also the 3rd floor. And southernmost windows grouping. Because you do see these actually walking down the street, and on the very first front page, you can see those, especially on the further south, at those 2 groupings, but anyway, it's similar to Jonna's comment, but it just was about the 3rd floor. Andrew, looking at that photo, 3rd floor, does that make
Yes, I
sense to
think it
you?
resembles more of the warehouse character.
Yeah, we're not really in the warehouse district, but yeah, so, okay,
So, Mark, I would have a hard time, I think, writing a condition regarding 27 and 28, because as I read these, first of all, there's a lot of back and forth in the section itself.
mhm,
And I think one thing it references how much stronger the detail alignment is on the south side of the street as opposed to the north. Here we're on the north. I mean, I don't feel strongly enough to write that condition. How's that?
okay. Bob, you can try it, or I mean, all I would say is that to strengthen the articulation and or material change on the 1-story to carry a stronger look. Similar or continuing an appearance of the roof line of the east adjacent 3 buildings, I guess. I don't know, something like that. Why don't you, if you wouldn't mind, work on something and we can always wordsmith it, but I don't think it's dramatic in any sense, but I think it's a point well made. Other conditions to talk about, or any of the new ones? Let me ask a question about number 1. It's really the last elephant in the room. I totally understand what the applicant said, that, oh, if it's 5 feet off the alley to the 2nd floor now, if you make it 10 feet, that it kind of distorts the good work that they did on the 3rd floor. But I still believe the guidelines would support, and I realize there's offending buildings down that alley that haven't done what creative work they've done here to comply, and that stairway, it's pretty narrow, but I believe there should be, as Jonna said, further setback on the south, or excuse me, on that 2nd story, which would need something correspondingly. I think whatever you say, if you say it's, and I don't think we need to say the number of feet, I think we give them some latitude here, but if it was 2 or 3 feet further, I realize that's some square footage, but if you did on the 2nd, I think you'd have to take it and step it back further on the 3rd proportionally.
Well, and John, maybe we can ask you this question. Wouldn't it be if if the increase at the second level was, if the stepping down was increased, let's say 3 feet, just to throw a number out there.
Yeah.
Isn't the intent then that the 5 feet is still maintained at the third? In other words, both move back 3? In other words, I mean.
Oh, I see. Well, that would be my thought. They go,
Yeah,
that's what I just said.
We're happy with 5. at the third.
Proportionally.
Keep 5 at the third. We'd also like some additional at the second.
Oh, I see.
Push the whole thing back slightly.
Oh,
Well, I think,
I don't know. So
I mean, let's just devil's advocate. Let's say they push the second floor back 5 feet. Now the third and the second are in line or in the same plane. That's not what.
no. Okay, so what I was proposing is a proportional increase. If you went 3 feet back more on the second, then you should go 3 feet back more on the third and really give some respect to the alley for the guidelines. But what you're saying is, oh, if you-
That is what I was saying.
oh, it is okay. We're saying the same thing. So we could say, set the third floor back proportionally to John, we could add that, and the third floor proportionally to her sentence about the second level, right? And the third level. Just insert and the third level proportionally. Is that right, Tracy, Stacy?
I mean, sure, it's in a way, it's just adding a lot more words. I think
Yeah.
one says what it needs to say.
I would agree with Stacy. I think leaving one as is kind of gets the point across.
Okay. So they'll know from one that they're setting back the second level and they're also thereby going to set the third level back.
Because, well, the third is relative to the second.
Yeah,
If you move the second back.
okay, it's all
third-
going, okay. No argument, okay. It's not even late. All right, well then I think we all agree with John as number 2, and at this stage, they've heard a lot of comments. I think we've got an experienced architect here. Show us the maximum you can show us to accomplish what we're talking about. Don't go 6 inches, please. Respectfully. Since we're not going to name a footage, unless you want to name a footage.
Lord, no.
No, okay.
Not supposed to.
All right. So we got a 1 through 5, we got a 6, restudy the old Roma cornice, south facade detail. And number 7 that Bob's working
You
on.
want to hear it and then we'll try it.
Okay,
try it
this is
on
good.
for size?
This is good.
Strengthen the articulation of the front facade to relate to the adjacent one-story historic buildings to the east per MSC 27 intro and A-1.
The only thing is, I'd say strengthen the articulation and or material
And
differentiation.
material.
And or material. I don't know if it takes both. I don't know.
Or material.
We've kind of covered all 4 bases or and home plate, 3 bases.
Yeah. That works.
Okay, all right. So I think, who wants to make this motion?
I think you need to show us how it's done, Mark.
No, I promised only 1 motion a year. Remember at the
Well,
last
I'll
meeting?
make the motion.
Okay.
I move to approve to the, oh, no. I move to approve preliminary large-scale application for the addition to an existing building at 133 East Colorado Avenue, Unit C, Lot 77R, Block 7, Town of Telluride, based on the findings in the staff memo dated September 21, 2022, and with the following conditions. 1, as stated in the memo. 2, well, 1 through 5, sorry, as stated in the memo. With an additional number 6 to restudy the historic cornice of the Roma building and its relationship to the addition. And number 7 to strengthen,
Want me to read it?
yeah,
Is that okay?
Well, we should take it as a friendly amendment.
sure.
Okay,
Let's
I'll
just do
do
it as a friendly amendment. This motion is based on evidence testimony provided at a public hearing held on September 21, 2022, with notice of such hearing provided as required by the Telluride Land Use Code.
Kieran will second.
Friendly amendments?
Friendly amendment. I would like to add number 7, strengthen the articulation and or material of the front facade to relate to the adjacent one-story historic buildings to the east or MSC 27 intro and A-1.
Excellent.
I will accept that. amendment.
I will accept that as well.
Okay, would you accept one more friendly amendment?
Well, let's hear it.
That was a trick question. On John, it's number 2, so we don't miss anything, where she says revise the second level windows in the south and north facades. I would like to suggest a friendly amendment to insert after that and the third floor windows on the east and west southmost locations, comma, to reflect a traditional window wash. Third story.
Oh, I understand. I'll accept that.
I accept that as well.
Any other friendly amendments? We're awful friendly. Karen, how do you vote?
Karen, yes.
Stacy, yes.
Mark, yes.
Bob, yes.
Andrew, yes.
See it final.
Thank you.
Thank you guys very much.
Good job. Great building. Okay. Sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry,
It's a
Stacy,
different
that
Position, but
you sent a new mark that I
thank you.
couldn't keep up with 20 minutes.
Those are just easy.
Oh, do you need to announce your recusal?
I do. I am recused from the next item due to the fact that I am employed by the applicant.
Okay, and if, in the name of family and sleep, I don't think we're gonna have any board and staff discussion if you choose to stay home.
I'm flying to Seattle tomorrow, so I'm gonna go home back.
Oh. Oh, good luck.
That's part of this, right?
Okay, our last project of the evening is at 214 South Fir. It's consideration of preliminary large-scale addition to an existing building in the commercial zone district, which will increase the floor area by more than 25% and result in a building which will contain more than 5,000 square foot of floor area per land use code 7203A4. A small scale repositioning of a non-rated THS primary structure 5SM 1622 in the HPOD per land use code THS or land use code 7203B14, and a small scale repositioning of a non-rated THS secondary structure in the HPOD per land use code 7203B14, and an insubstantial scale demolition of a non-designated secondary structure, that's the garage, within the THLD per land use code 7203D7. Illegal description is lot 8R, block 23, 214 South Fir is the address. It's in the commercial zone district. Owner PLK West 2, a Colorado LLC, applicant Alpine Planning and Tommy Hine Architects, staff member John Wenzel. Welcome back, Matt Lee.
Thank you, Chairperson Shamba. So we received one written public comment from Chris Ann Schwarn that I forwarded to you, I believe, earlier this week, Monday. Did everyone read Chris Ann's comments about the trees?
Yes.
And just a reminder that we did a site walk with story poles at this site earlier this afternoon. Before I start or get too far into it, I want to acknowledge that Kiernan has won the editing prize for this memo. He pointed out to me that I had referred to First Street as Willow Street more than 2 or 3 times in the memo. So everyone knows where my head was, and I apologize, but it should say First Street, not Willow Street. Okay, moving on. This site is located on the east side of South First Street between Pacific and San Juan. Directly to the north is the supporting house that is to be demolished and reconstructed. Across the street are the transfer warehouse and the strong house, contributing and local landmarks. Currently existing on the site is the non-contributing with qualifications house, a non-contributing without qualifications shed at the alley, and a non-historic, non-designated garage. There are also several large trees on the site, including the large spruce tree along First Street, not Willow Street, that are to be removed as part of this project. So the project includes preserving the historic portion of the non-contributing with qualifications house, repositioning it about 5 feet to the north and about a foot to the east, and raising it 2 feet from its current foundation. The non-historic shed addition on the south side of the house is to be removed. As I mentioned, the house is not rated, so the rehabilitation standards do not apply. But I wanted to mention that it was interesting to read the 3-page assessment of the house's historic integrity in the THAS survey form. Clearly, Carl McWilliams was struggling a bit with the designation for this house. And he did land on non-contributing with qualifications, but it also could have gone to supporting, it seems. So I do want to commend the applicants and owner for choosing to keep the historic house and integrate it into the new design. However, repositioning the house will further compromise the integrity of the house. I don't think that there would likely be an opportunity to raise the rating to supporting after this project. So moving on, the non-contributing without qualification shed will also be repositioned to the north and east property lines and rotated to be used for trash enclosure. The non-designated garage will be demolished and a new commercial and residential building will be constructed to the south of the house, which will actually be attached to the house. So a reminder that to approve the demolition of the garage, even though it is non-designated, HARC must find that all 5 of these standards for review and demolition are met. There is a separate motion in the memo for demolition, so please make sure to remember to make 2 motions when you're ready to do that. So the new building is 3 stories, which steps down to a 1-story commercial module at the sidewalk's edge along First Street. The 2nd story steps back about 10 feet, and the 3rd story steps back another 10 feet away from the sidewalk. It's a full 3 stories at the rear of the lot and steps down minimally to the alley, which is addressed in the first recommended condition, which is provide greater stepping down to the alley, particularly as seen from the north side. So the south elevation appears to have greater stepping down than the north elevation, but I feel that the stacked decks that are the same depth kind of minimize the stepping down at the alley. And again, there is a variety along this alley, but would encourage HARC to take this into consideration. Condition number 2 is to clearly define the primary entrance, such as with recessed entry consistent with WC 14 and WC 34A, which talks about emphasizing the front door. So the historic house has a clearly defined and prominent front door, which will be retained, but the entrance to the new commercial space is recessed along the north side of this addition. On the plan, it shows commercial entry with an arrow here. I'm not sure, and perhaps the applicant can clarify for us, but traditionally a commercial entrance would be on the front facade as part of the storefront, which is not included in this proposal. And then the 2 final conditions are to indicate the location of on-site bicycle and storage, bicycle parking and storage, and ensure that the solar panel racks and frames are non-reflective, and the town does encourage the use of solar, so that is consistent. Happy to answer any questions. Our applicants with us are with us via Zoom.
Okay, questions for Jana?
I have a question, John. So regarding your condition number 1 about stepping down the alley, is it primarily this sort of 3rd level deck that extends out with the 5.5 foot setback that is what is most sort of troublesome to you?
I think that it's the stacked decks. Let me, I'll share my screen again.
Mhm.
So Matt, if you see here, looking at the north elevation, the decks are stacked one on top of the other. The east facade it appears straight up and down. It appears there's, there's a little bit more relief on this from looking to the north from the south elevation, but I guess I'd like to hear more from the applicants about how they feel they're achieving stepping down. Obviously, the little shed will help with pedestrian scale and somewhat stepping down. I feel like this is not sufficient kind of stepping down to that alley, which has pretty successfully done that.
Other questions? John, regarding the spruce tree that's not being projected to be torn down and replaced, in the guidelines, other than WC 16 plant materials, is there someplace else that references trees that I'm not remembering? Or any board member?
There's natural resources which say to protect and enhance existing stands of vegetation and to protect existing vegetation during construction. That's number 3.
WC 3?
WC
Okay.
3.
Yep. Okay.
Are you talking
And
about?
I mentioned that when HARC reviewed the demolition of 208 South Fir, the tree was mentioned and it was included as a condition to be protected
Right.
during reconstruction of that house. The tree is obviously not on that lot, but HARC was concerned that that tree be protected and included a condition to that effect.
Do you feel that was an erroneous condition because it wasn't on the lot, or have there been some, if the lot was subdivided, right, recently, or
Just changed owners.
just changed?
The southern portion for this
Thank-
project has been sold. I don't think it was an erroneous condition. I think that we encourage the protection of trees, that the roots go on more than one lot, right? So I think that the intention of the condition was that they protect the roots of the tree that didn't belong to them. But their intention was to protect the tree. And I also wonder if the applicants have been coordinating with the owner, Mr. Mimling of the other lot, about the tree, because I think it's been under consideration before for that other application.
Okay. Okay, there's no other questions. We'll hear from the applicant.
Could we take a 1-minute break?
Oh, yes, sure. Bio break. Okay, 1-minute bio break while they're sharing their screen and getting set up here. And just as a reminder to everybody, small scale, so we will not see this
No,
again.
this
this
is
is large.
large scale.
Mhm.
This is
Repositionings are small scale.
preliminary large scale
Oops.
for the new construction.
Yeah, okay. Thanks for reminding me. Okay. That helps. Yeah. Okay, we will rejoin and hear from the applicants who have shared their screen. Thank you. Go ahead, Chris.
Thank you.
Tommy.
Good evening. Chris Hawkins with Alpine Planning. Tommy is also on the Zoom, so thank you for finally having time to look at this evening. This image I just wanted to start with because there's been a lot of discussion about trees in the commercial core of the town, and that tree is about right here. And there's a main goal of trying to create a really nice sunspot here. And that tree right now just dominates this whole space, and it would be very difficult to try to create this type of space in here. And it's really intended to be like a public gathering space for the commercial uses in the storefront. So that's the primary reason for, requesting to remove that tree. Understand there was some past commitments for that, but the goal, at least, I hope you can appreciate, and look forward to hearing your comments on that. Pedestrian scale has been another primary conversation that we'll talk about in a little bit. This home is, in this RGS photo, you can see it. It's just this rectangular form, simple gable form. And it really hasn't changed much between the 1908 and 1922 Sanborn map. So the proposal is to remove the non-historic shed addition and the garage, which is clearly not historic, and then to relocate it over a little bit. I'll show that more in an image. I didn't want to show this map. It shows the trees to be removed much better in the red. These weren't reflected too well in the existing conditions plan, but they are reflected well in this plan, just in case there were any questions about that. Overall, the structure itself, this is a non-historic part to be removed, and then the rectangular gable form to be preserved, and then the shed is being rotated and repurposed for utility trash enclosure in the back, and then the non-historic garage being removed. The repositioning itself, this shows the current home location and the shift over. And again, this is intended to provide an open up space in this area in the patio. There still are minimal connectors at the back and the front, so most of the historic building form is being retained overall. And then you can kind of see the L-shaped form that steps back overall. This is just the front view that shows the shift over and the change from this location here to here. And then I did want to talk about pedestrian scales, because that's been a primary emphasis of this project. Again, looking at how it's being relates to people. I think the front area, you can easily understand that. And then using this through variety of color, texture, through architectural design to enhance the pedestrian experience and provide visual interest. And again, finding walking in alleys a comfortable and pleasant experience. The scale of buildings and the architectural treatments used should enhance this pedestrian oriented experience. And then the specific policies of developing the ground floor level of all projects to encourage pedestrian activity, a variety in setback height, color, and texture of materials for pedestrian experience, commercial storefronts and display windows, the entrances John has already talked about, and then display windows. And this, I think everyone would agree, this has a great pedestrian relationship here in the step up. And then I think most of the focus of the conversation will be on the alley, maybe not. But if you really look at this compared to other treatments, there's a lot going on here, but primarily the stepping is coming down from the third floor patio to the lower deck to the shed, as well as this utility enclosure here, the deck posts, the changes of materials, the garage doors, the doors, all providing that pedestrian experience. And there's also a varying setback of 14 feet. So you can kind of see the stepping already in this element. And if it's just this deck that's not causing the happening, and I'm really curious Tommy's opinion on it, but I think the rest of it, when you really can envision walking down the alley where you have this historic shed, you're already relating to that. And then again, the step up, overall, we think that is working pretty well, but you have this big change of setbacks going from 14 feet to 20 feet to 14 feet. And most buildings in this area don't provide near this level of setback on the alley side. So we think that that's a good positive thing, along with the patio area I already talked about out front. And just this various streetscapes, which you're really familiar with. I'm not going to dwell on these. If you had any questions about the massings that were presented. One area, hopefully I didn't zip past this picture. So as far as the exterior materials on the building and design, stone, brick, board form concrete, perforated metal panels, steel panels, and steel structures, kind of a heavier to lighter materials on upper floors. Glad to hear any comments or concerns you have on those for any of the elevations. But again, what we think is a very attractive building in the commercial core. And again, the alley side, we've already talked about the change of materials being part of the pedestrian experience, board form concrete to brick, the garage door and door, decks, upper terraces and rooftop. And then, just existing context to go off of this, right here, you've got probably a minimal 5-foot setback to this garage face, and then it goes up. So in this instance, there's a big setback between the alley and here, and then you have other buildings that are right up on the alley to where it's literally almost 1.5 stories, where we're not proposing that at all by our example. And then if you look, the stepping against the setbacks here, and then this more modern building, you can see how I think we're providing more of a pedestrian scale than recent projects in the area, especially if you look up this way. We appreciate these shed reforms help provide that level of pedestrian experience on the Silverjack building, but it's, our setback compared to this is quite a bit more significant, and then the stepping we feel is appropriate. But again, we look forward to hearing your comments and questions on that. I know, Tommy, you want to add some thoughts on the design, and I'm glad to go to whichever sheet you want.
Well, I think you and John have done a good job. I just wanted to reiterate that I think I understand Jonna's point about the commercial entry on Fur, which I concur with her. And if it really is just the deck, I can see Jonna's point on stepping that deck element back a little further. Because I do feel we've done a good job, like setting the whole mass of the building, 14, 15 feet away from the alley, and just all the variations and planes. I think it meets the intent, and then some. But I could see if the board wanted to, or to clarify what Jonna was saying, stepping that third floor projecting deck back and then creating more of a setback there. That I can see doing that portion. But other than that, I think the real benefits of this project, as challenging as it has been, is really saving the scale of these historic structures in the middle of the warehouse commercial district. I think that's going to really enhance the whole zone. So it's cool to be able to do that, I think. And I think we've done this in a creative manner as well.
And just my final comment on the, I appreciate the public comment we got during the site walk, and I'm anticipating that it's going to come up again tonight. This is the commercial core of the town. I imagine there were trees before the library was built, or any building before the library was built there. And it's just a natural progression of development in the commercial core. I think that, in general, landscaping is very limited in the commercial core. Preservation of trees is fairly limited in the commercial core because it's seen as the active, vibrant place of the town where infill density should occur. So I know that doesn't address the concerns, and I understand those concerns, but as far as the specific policies and how they've been implemented, there's been lots of examples where trees have been removed for development in the warehouse commercial or commercial zone district. So thank you for your time, and we appreciate hearing your comments or questions.
Okay, questions for the applicant?
I have none.
I have two. When you look at your cover sheet right there with the word questions, let's look at this one. Is there an opportunity with inspecting the supporting house next door? And again, like Jana said, I commend you for saving your structures, two of the three structures there. To lower that back alley element, I know we were just talking about stepping the deck on the third floor from the alley side, but when I look at it from this side, it just seems reference to the adjacent under the name of context of neighborhood and mass and scale that it just looks so strong and powerful. And again, I get that you step back from the alley and wow, that's a long ways back from the street, but it just seems overwhelming. I think that's 32 foot or 33 foot high. Is there an opportunity to lower that another foot or two to be respectful of the supporting house to the north?
This?
No, the rear structure.
It's this one right here.
Okay.
Yeah, right there. Yeah. Is there an opportunity, I'll just use the aggregate to lower that slightly to, which would help on the alley side, but would also help on this side with respect to the supporting neighbor house? The height.
Well, we gestured, the strategy we've done up to this point, Mark, is to slope the roofs down. And, I think that portion of the building is so far back that we didn't think it was a concern. And again, I think we've addressed, we've really limited the mass on this lot to give that historic gable, or really as a non-contributing gable, some breathing room. So that would be a challenge for sure, with the head heights and the ceiling heights we've already expressed.
So the answer is the distance from the street and as shown on A31, the sloping roof that kind of breaks. It's hard to see and it's straight on elevate.
Yeah, if you look at a side elevation, I think Chris can show you in the north, maybe Chris. If you see how far back that is from the property line, and if you, I wonder if the rendering and the elevations are almost deceiving because they're not showing how far back that is. It's really at the rear of the site.
Yeah.
Okay. It's probably 50 or 60 feet back.
Yeah.
And then from a site plan context too, for that historic home, I'd have to see if we have an image of that home. So it ends about right here, Mark, where that blue tarp is, and it's reconstructed. So that shed reform is already coming down towards that house right there.
Okay. And realizing on this not fully rated house, my last question is, when I first looked at this and I thought that, the history of context neighborhood with the two houses, side by side, both 6 feet off the street, whatever, as it looked at, and I saw that maybe should be respected, but I get why you're moving it 11 feet offline. You're not prevented from doing so, but by doing so, to me, and I don't know, I might have been the person that was in on that condition of the spruce tree, which we approved the adjacent lot based on saving it, that it's not a shade issue because the sun comes on the other side of it to the south. And B, as I stood there today, I imagined limbing it up, so that more room for tables and so. So I'll turn it into a question is, if we agree to the moving it back 11 feet and 4 foot to the north, the house, which we all appreciate you saving, wouldn't that be a solution to saving it and not interfering, since it's not a shade issue because it doesn't shade from the east? Wouldn't that be a solution or not?
Well, the roots would be so compromised. I think it would challenge the health of the tree, and also the scale of this spruce and its location is really out of context, even with these small historic structures. And then when you look at the photographs from the period of significance, this tree is out of scale with the period of significance as well. So I don't know that, I think it'd be problematic. It's problematic for both sites, Mark, really.
Okay, well, and again, if you're moving it back 11 feet, I don't know how problematic the roots would be.
Not 11
It's
feet.
not 11,
It's 1 foot
11
back,
inches.
11 inches.
essentially 1 foot back.
Uh,
And then 11 inches is about almost 5 feet to the north.
411.
Oh, 11 inches.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. Sorry. Well, that may change the discussion. We'll see. Thanks, guys.
Yep, thank you.
Public comment?
Can I just add something real quick?
Oh,
Mark? I didn't include it as a condition in this memo because I see I indicated that landscaping would be reviewed at the final review. The proposal includes removing the fir tree and then replacing it with a planter with a tree in a planter. And I think my recommendation would be that they just plant a tree there in the ground to replace the spruce tree. I don't think it needs to be a condition right now at preliminary, but I would like to highlight that for the applicants because clearly it's an issue. The tree is going to be a topic of conversation, and I think if it is allowed to be removed, it needs to be replaced with something that will grow there, not just in a container.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, any public comment? Yes, Pascal, if you could unmute yourself and read your name for the record.
Yes, Pascal Villiger. I am a neighbor. I reside at 150 West Pacific. So this property is effectively, I guess, not the adjacent lot, but the lot adjacent to the adjacent lot to where we reside. And look, I'm very supportive of this project. I think it's a very nice design. I guess I would make a couple of comments. The first being, I think we still need to maybe get some resolution on the 208 South Fern Street, because as I understand it, when 208 came to this committee about a year ago, there was discussion about rebuilding it, moving the property, or rebuilding the property and putting it onto its new, I guess, plat, if you will, I guess, if that's the right word. And I'm not sure that's necessarily reflected here in the drawings here. It seems like by moving the historic property on 214 4.5 feet north, it seems like it will, even with the movement that was contemplated with 208 to put it onto the property line, it seems quite crowded there. And if you actually look at how the windows line up on the 208 property versus what's contemplated here at 214 for the historic, it seems like the setbacks are quite narrow, and the window orientation might be a little odd, where you don't get frankly a lot of light coming into either of the two historic buildings. So I would want to make sure that that's maybe reflected in the drawings, because it's not clear to me that it is for the 208. And then I'd like to see a little less massing on the third floor towards the back in the alleyway on the north side. It would be great if we could kind of maybe see that's maybe a little bit more of a tiering, if you will, on the north side, as opposed to being almost a kind of a solid wall. I know there's a little bit of a step back, and so it would be great to see that. And then finally, as it relates to the tree, I'm all for the removal of that tree and planting a new tree. That it's not a particularly beautiful tree. I'm not normally a proponent of taking trees down, but I think putting something of a more of a moderate scale and kind of cleaning it up, I'd be a fan of that. But again, I think generally supportive of the project, but would like to see some of some of maybe these considerations being addressed. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Don't see any, Piper.
Neither do I.
Okay. Any rebuttal by the applicant? Wait a minute, hold it. Here's a Corey Booz. Corey, could you unmute yourself? We'll go ahead and take you then as a public comment here. Sorry.
Hello, Corey Booz here. Also a resident of 150 West Pacific in the deed restricted unit. Just wanted to comment on the tree. I think that there are far too many trees being removed in the town of Telluride for large scale construction. I think that this tree adds a nice pillar of environmental friendliness to the downtownness of the street. Just want to add that to public comment that I think Mark brought it up with the fact that the shade issue should not be an issue because the sun would be on the south side of that in the winter and on the north side of that in the summer, which would actually provide shade for that public area. So I think the tree staying would be a benefit to everyone in this town. Thank you.
Okay. Any other public? Admin? Would you read your name again into the record? You comment.
Yeah, hi, it's me again. It's Stevie Henson. Thank you so much. My first comment was, I believe it was Mark that asked, I think it's section 3-505 that talks about the removal of trees. I'll spare you guys reading it, but there's just some real specific language in there that talks about not removing trees unless there's a special permit. And I just want to speak on behalf. I think the project is actually really a good looking project, and I'm strongly against removal of the first tree, the spruce tree, and because of not only just because of the shade, just because I think I heard the comments from Chris, and I may have the comment wrong. I may have the person wrong. Just because that it's a commercial area and so many other trees have been removed. I think that's actually not a reason to remove trees. I think it's the exact opposite. I don't think that's a precedent that should be moved forward, and I'm against it. So I really appreciate that. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Okay, seeing no other public comment, we'll start deliberations again. Johnny has 1 through 4 on the table. If you have any disagreement with any of those, speak, but if you have any additional items for conditions, please list them now. We will, assuming we approve it, see it again at finals, since it is large scale, only a small scale repositioning. So who wants to comment?
I suppose I can go, like, with regard to the proposed condition, I think 1 through 4 fully appropriate. I think though, the relocation of the non-contributing qualifications house does bump up against a couple of guidelines, particularly WC2, WC2A1, and then the WC15B2, or just the WC15 policy with regard to side yard setbacks. Looking at the context of the site is the WC2, and then WC15 speaks more to side yard setbacks or setbacks in general, and then particularly with this, the rhythm of the buildings, historic buildings in particular. I think, when you read the, I would say, anguished kind of analysis of how to rate the building in the survey, one of the things that was pointed out was how the integrity, particularly the physical integrity of where it was set, being where it has always been set. And then in relation to the house to the north as well, the relationship between the two as they're presently constituted underlines the fact that these were dwellings. And I think by moving it a little bit, you kind of lose some of that historic fabric. So I don't think it would be appropriate to move it particularly as much as is being proposed. Now, it's my opinion, that's my reading of guidelines. If everyone else is in favor of it, so be it. But that's like, now, because if I'm gonna propose that, that creates a whole bunch of other issues for the project as well, so. Were the move to be allowable, I think, you know, lowering, doing some other ways of stepping off bigger, new construction to allow that smaller house to breathe, and I think would be wholly appropriate as well. I think there are arguments to protect the tree, if at all humanly possible, the WC3. So those are some of the issues I'd be looking at.
Good points. Yeah, I wonder out loud whether those guidelines you cited, you know, we've got several instances in the guidelines trump the guidelines that they cited on open space and creating, you know, pedestrian space and all those things. Certainly, if it was a supporting or contributing house, we wouldn't even be having this conversation.
Yeah, I think what it boils down to me is that the context isn't just that these were small one-story buildings, and though that is important. It's also that they were dwellings in amongst the warehouse district. And I think by smushing the two of them together so closely, you kind of lose the fact that these were individual dwellings, houses with yards, things like that. And I think that, to me, that context is incredibly important, because this is one of the few areas within the warehouse district where you have that. And I think there's significant historic fabric lost by popping them together. And I think the guidelines, as I cited in particular, would discourage that. But again, my reading.
And 1 through 4, you're good with John's additions?
Yes, correct.
Okay, Matt, we'll just go down the line, I guess.
Sure. I actually want to ask John a question, and if you don't know, maybe the applicant. So on sheet A 3.1, there is a small partial east elevation that shows the outline of this house to the north. And you can see how these buildings touch each other. And I'm curious if you know where this building is shown dashed. Did we approve a relocation of that farther to the north? So it's not going to have that conflict.
The applicant could verify if they have taken into account repositioning that was approved with the reconstruction. But as it sits currently, the house to the north at 208 is actually sitting on the property line. So that was allowed to be moved on.
Okay. The house, adjacent house is going to move to the north.
It is, but I don't know if this project has taken that into account.
So on that elevation on page A31, could the applicant answer? Take an accommodation that house was moving on 208?
Right, part of our move to the north anticipated the approval of that house on 208 moving north as well, which was approved. So the historic relationship is actually going to be maintained much closer because that house is a non-conformity sitting over the property line. So I guess the shift on our property, along with the shift on the property to the north, from our perspective, maintained that historic spacing. What we're showing on our drawings is simply the existing location of the house that burned up.
Oh, good point. Yeah.
And that's why we're dashing it in.
So you're saying whatever distance they were apart before, they're going to stay that distance apart?
Well, I think it was 3 feet or something that the house to the north moved. And I think there's probably about a 1 foot or 12 to 18 inch variation there between the houses then. So to Kiernan's point, from the streetscape, it will look extremely similar to what it is now because they both shift to the north.
It's not 5 feet.
I think they moved that house 1 foot, didn't they?
Do you want
208.
me to look it up? I mean, I can. look it up.
My recall.
I mean, I can find, and we can reflect that approval on the next final application too, just to clarify that.
Yeah, it should be shown, I think, as it was approved.
Yeah.
I'm looking that up while we continue.
Yeah, she's looking. So if it got moved 1 foot and this moved 4 foot, then they'd be maybe 3 feet closer together than what they looked like historically. I guess if we went the full 4 feet, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, also the non-contributing without qualifications, I think we've got a little bit more leeway. That was our feeling.
Yep.
So what would be the spacing between them if the one moves, whatever's supposed to move, and we move this one over 4 feet?
That's what we're trying to determine right now.
Yeah, John is
That's
looking
what
it up.
John's looking at. I'm
What-
sorry.
Do you mind if I jump in?
Jump
while
into something else.
John's looking it up. So, I agree with John's conditions 1 through 4, and I don't have any new conditions to add. I would like to go back to this, the distance it's moved and adjacency to the house to the north. To your comment, Mark, about stepping down the roof, I feel the applicants have done a commendable job of trying to salvage this house and build around it, and it's pushed pretty far back. So I don't have any concerns with that roof height as far back as it is.
Yep.
And it seems like Tommy's already conceded to number 1 and 2 in the concessions, sorry, in the conditions.
About this side of the room.
I don't have anything to add. I think I'd like to know about this, the spacing between the buildings. I think John's conditions are good, and I don't have anything else to add.
Anything else, Andrew?
I don't have anything either.
You know, I'm still stuck on the tree. In that, depending how far this building moves, and I've been down this road before in construction, if houses were there where they were, those tree roots, if you even perhaps put a new foundation right where they were, most likely will survive because they weren't going further inboard of the foundations if they're just being replaced where they were. And of course, then if we slide this closer to the tree or 4 foot movement, then maybe that does put it a little bit in peril, but I wouldn't imagine without a basement that there's a very deep foundation and it would only affect maybe 15% of the tree diameter, 20% of the tree diameter in that corner. So I just, it's a 200-year plus spruce. I know we did it the first time. I'm just saying, why wouldn't we do it again unless they bring forth an arborist to say that it's definitely, which could be a condition, you know.
I was gonna suggest that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have an arborist.
And not let us try to be the root experts.
Yeah.
But
I could support that.
yeah. This is glorious. But anyway, John, did you find something?
So it looks like 208 South Fair was approved to move to the north 9 inches. Currently there's 7 feet between the houses.
After that goes 9 inches or
Right now.
right now, current
Condition.
7 feet?
And this is based on the 208 site plan.
Okay, and 208 was approved at 9 inches further
209.
to the north. And 214 requests 4 foot.
So you would
Four-
have
4
3
feet
feet 9
11.
between
Yeah,
them.
5 feet really.
Left.
Well, let's call it 4'11", but 5 feet. So you would have 6 feet. You have 7 feet now and then it got moved, so you have 8 feet between the houses, and if they go 5 feet, you'll have 3 feet between the houses. Which is a minimum setback, I guess, and maybe not this zone,
Not this zone.
not this
Zero
zone,
setback in this zone.
0, yeah.
Don't
Yeah.
forget that's, both of those are gonna have to be fire rated too, guys. So, you know, that's a different discussion, but
And added level of complexity, the materials are meant to be restored to what they are now on the house to the north.
Yeah, fire rated, yeah.
we'll probably end up having to do a heated concrete drain pan in there too, Mark. So it's, it's kind of a,
Okay. Well, I think we agree with John's 4 conditions. I don't know, would we have consensus to use the word before the next final to have an arborist? Well, I guess we need to determine how much we would allow the house spacing to be or this to move. And then slash another condition that have an arborist give an opinion on the survivability of the tree, I guess. And just know that we did our job to try, but defer to somebody. Let's talk, sounds like there might be consensus for that, but what about the distance? What about the 4'11"? Where are we? It's so 5 feet between the houses versus 7 feet now, right? So,
No,
No,
3
no.
feet between the houses.
oh, so therefore we'll leave 3 feet, yeah.
Yeah, approximately 3 feet.
And I really don't know. Other comments, but maybe there's something in between.
I appreciate what Kieran's saying about trying to keep the historic spacing of these buildings. I don't want to make up difficult for the applicant and for the guy to the north to try to build these buildings and have them fire rated. I also really appreciate Tommy and his team's effort to save this building and to create a lot of space and stepping down around it. So I'm a little torn.
What if could we get some consensus that if there was 7 feet between we allow 3 feet between the houses, or in other words, 2'11" versus 4'11", and some sort of compromise here would also help with the fire rating issue, but it also might help save the tree.
Well, just let me ask, I know in other districts where you have the 3-foot setback on the side, so you got 6 feet in between. If it's less than that, you have to fire rate the walls. So I don't know if that 6 foot applies to apply here or not.
Oh, it will apply. I think that's what Tommy was mentioning.
If that's a code issue, then
But they don't, really, it's a 0 setback in this district. It's not.
it
like-
is, but the
Yeah.
fire rating is a code issue that you'd have to do it, and
Code issues really aren't our purview per se.
yeah, I don't think it's up to, it'd be the building department for that.
Yeah, that'd
I've
be
done
something
it
I'll have to
before,
work
we've
out.
done it before on other houses that didn't have the appropriate setback and they kept it where it was. You put in fire rated drywall and then put the siding back on and you
Yeah.
get sprinkler heads that stick out the side of the house.
Yeah, well, we'll let them deal with that. But I guess what I'm throwing on the table is, 3 feet between the houses, to me. I just assume see if we could reach a compromise, maybe have it 5 feet between the houses, which would allow them 2'11" versus 4'11", and I don't think it crushes their plans. It might give more credence to the survivability of the tree, another 2 feet. But
What about allowing them to move it 4 feet instead of 4'11"? Seems like a compromise that would result in slightly larger than 3 feet between the walls.
yeah, it's 12 inches different, so I don't know. I think it's something. I mean, I think we all respect that it should be 3 feet apart. Doesn't look right. I mean, doesn't look like context of the old neighborhood of what we saw.
What's there right now?
But well, let's just take a straw poll.
So what would be the number you're proposing?
He's throwing out
4 feet.
4 feet rather than
It's-
4'11",
yeah.
which would leave 4 feet between the houses. There's currently 7. Kieran says what?
Nothing.
Well, you want,
I leave it as is the best for the historic context
Okay,
and
7
spacing
feet.
and everything else. But if I'm outvoted, I'm outvoted. I'm not gonna throw a fit here.
I know, I've just seen where we get to here. I'm not gonna say. No pressure.
I understand Kernan's point and I respect that and I think that would be ideal. But I think given the context, doing a narrower spacing would be okay. As much as we can do, which I think you said would be 3 feet.
I think, I'm not sure if I have the math right, but I think as proposed, it would leave 210 between the exterior walls of the building. So if we went to say 4 feet, then what we would be, we'd be well over 3 feet. I think they might have more options to deal with their eaves.
I think I could deal with 3 feet.
I'm in agreement with what Matt's proposing.
Okay,
Go do
then
what you need to do.
would you like to make the motion, Matt?
Do you want to, can we clarify on the tree or do you want to add a friendly?
I can add a friendly amendment.
Hold on a second. I move to approve the small scale repositioning of a non-rated THAS primary structure. 5 SM.1622, the small scale repositioning of a non-rated THAS secondary structure, TAS 0.155, and the preliminary large scale addition at 214 South First Street, Lot 8R, Block 23, Town of Telluride, based on the findings in the staff memo dated September 21st, 2022, with the following conditions. 1 through 4 as stated. I'm going to add a condition 5 to reduce the northern setback of the historic structure from 4 feet 11 to 4 feet. Sorry, not setback, the move to the north.
Don't reduce the north.
Sorry, let me restate that. Condition number 5. Limit the movement of the historic structure to 4 feet to the north.
There you go. Do we have a second?
Second.
Would you, I'd like to offer a friendly amendment for your consideration. Before the next hearing, submit an arborist opinion on the survivability of the spruce tree on the west side, including the consideration of a 4-foot move to the north towards the tree. I didn't say that, but. Anyway. Okay, before the next meeting, have an arborist opinion submitted, considering the survivability of the tree with the current other conditions.
I'll accept that. Don't have a second though, do we?
Yeah, I did.
I need to read this motion is based on evidence testimony before we vote.
But yeah, just to wrap it up, yeah.
Based on.
Oh, well, we gotta vote.
Okay.
No, not yet.
No.
Not yet.
Finish the.
Part of the
Oh,
motion.
Okay.
This
okay,
motion is
sorry.
based on evidence testimony provided at the public hearing held on September 21st, 2022, with the notice of such hearing provided as required by the Telluride Land Use Code.
Okay,
Kiernan, no, for moving the primary structure. I don't think it should be moved.
Matt, yes.
Marcus,
Bob, yes.
Andrew, yes.
okay. And then we have the demolition.
Yeah, I'll grab that one again.
Kiernan,
I move to approve the instantial demolition of a non-designated secondary structure garage located at 214 South First Street, lot 8R, Block 23, Town of Telluride, based on the findings in the staff memo dated September 21st, 2022, and with the following finding, number 1, as stated, and with the following conditions, numbers 1 and 2, as stated. This motion is based on evidence and testimony provided at a public hearing held on September 21st, 2022, with notice of such hearing provided as required by the Telluride Land Use Code.
Matt will second.
Kiernan, yes.
Matt, yes.
Mark, yes.
Bob, yes.
Andrew, yes.
And so it is. Any final board and staff discussion?
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris and Tony.
So we will adjourn at 9:18 AM. Excellent job. Some challenging projects, and good night all.